Chapter 355. Words that contained boundless joy echoed in the hall, and as the sound waves spread out, the scorching air that filled the hall dissipated a little, and the temperature showed signs of dropping. The moment the voice filled with excitement rang out, Little Purple Soul, who seemed to be in a deep sleep, slowly opened her little eyes. The sleepiness in her eyes disappeared in a flash, and her empty pupils were filled with light. She seemed to have just woken up. Little Purple Soul reached out her little hand and touched the light blue ring of fire. She looked down in disbelief. Even if she had forgotten everything, she could not forget the voice that was almost engraved into her soul. Big Brother! The pale blue ring of fire trembled slightly and actually became illusory. The blazing temperature in the great hall also dropped rapidly. Little Purple Soul looked down at Yun-Nua planet, and a tender voice that was filled with longing and grievance quietly came out from her small mouth. The voice had a slightly unreal feeling that was like a dream. She had once thought that this parting would be permanent. When Ziyen and the others heard this, they all looked at Yun-Nuashing. There was a strange look in their eyes. They wanted to ask how many sisters he had, but when they saw that Ming Ming was also very excited, they quickly closed their mouth. It had been more than 2 years since the first time they met. Little Purple Soul's appearance had not changed at all. She still looked like a 2 or 3-year-old. Her light purple robe and purplish golden hair swayed gently. She was like a little fairy who was surrounded by the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. She was perfect and flawless. Little Purple. Yun-Nuashing was completely relaxed when they finally met. During this period of time when he was deciphering the Jiuchong Hall, he had been thinking about this moment all the time. However, when this moment finally arrived, he calmed down and only felt gratified. After a while, Yun-Nuashing chuckled and slowly opened her arms. Big Brother! When Little Purple Soul saw this scene, it finally reacted. Its little hand passed through the blue fire circle and hurriedly went out. It rushed straight towards Yun-Nua planet and plunged into the familiar embrace that it had not seen for a year. Its little hand wrapped around his neck, and it started to sob softly. Big Brother, you're finally here. Little Purple thought that I would never see you again. Sob. Big Brother, where did you go? Big Sister Yu-Yin doesn't want me anymore. Little Purple thought that Big Brother didn't want Little Purple anymore. Sob. When everyone heard the childish sobbing, the fear in the voice, and the feeling of complete relaxation, everyone's hearts tightened, and even their noses felt a little sour. Little Purple, I'm here. I'm here. Big Brother and Little Purple will never be separated again, okay? Patting Little Purple Soul's back, Yun-Nuashing spoke in the most gentle voice he could muster. Everyone who heard it felt goosebumps all over their bodies. This gentleness was so strong that water could be squeezed out of it. Really? Little Purple Soul raised her head. There was still a hint of fear in her purplish gold eyes. Her little hands clutched Yun-Nuashing's clothes tightly, afraid that he would disappear in front of her in the next second. She was also afraid that this was just a dream. Of course. Yun-Nuashing rubbed her little head lovingly and wiped away the tears and snot on her little face. He hugged her tenderly for a while before slowly letting her go. Hee Little Purple, you're finally back. You have no idea how long we've been looking for you. Ming saw Little Purple Soul and grinned. She was about to say something when Yun-Nuashing covered her mouth. She couldn't finish her sentence. Big Sister Ming. Little Purple Soul greeted Ming happily when she saw him. Other than Yu-Yin, Yun-Nuashing and Ming were the closest people to her. She was touched to see them again. Yun-Nuashing glanced at Ming, who stuck her tongue out cutely at him. He felt a little helpless. Then, he introduced Little Purple Soul to the people around him. Big Brother, Big Sister, uncles and aunties. After Little Purple Soul heard this, she smiled sweetly. Then, she greeted everyone one by one. When everyone heard this, their hearts were filled with warmth. Their faces were filled with satisfaction. It was as if the fatigue of the past few days had been completely washed away. Ha! Jin Wang smiled like a blooming sunflower when he heard them. A golden light was released from his body uncontrollably, blinding everyone. Although it was not the first time Jin Wang, Yun Nuoxin, and Yao Hua had met Little Purple Soul, they were always called that every time they met. Their hearts were filled with warmth. Little Purple Soul's pure and adorable personality made everyone want to hug her. However, the little girl had inherited Ming's good tradition. She was clinging to Yun Nuoxing's arms. Now that they had reunited after such a long time, she was so clingy that everyone was envious of her. However, Little Purple did not have any problems with her growth, which surprised everyone. Girls tended to grow very quickly. It had been more than 2 years, but her appearance had not changed at all. Everyone took turns to check on her, but they did not find anything strange about her. However, Jin Wang and the others could not help but praise her pure soul. It was the first time they had seen such a pure soul that was tainted with a little bit of immortal qi. When Yun Nuoxing asked Little Purple Soul how she came to this place, she could not explain it clearly. Her confused look made him very confused. Little Purple doesn't know either. 3 days after Sister Yuan left, Little Purple was looking for Big Brother on the streets. Then I came here and slept until Big Brother came to find me. Little Purple Soul shook her head blankly. Her pair of clear little eyes stared into Yun Nuoxing's eyes, and she said very seriously. Yun Nuoxing frowned. The city where Yuan left Little Purple Soul was an astronomical distance away from Lihuan City. According to Little Purple Soul herself, she arrived at this place in the blink of an eye. This information shocked everyone. How powerful must one be to be able to do such a thing? Since ancient times, only people of that level could have such strength, right? How many people of that level were there today? No one had seen such a person for thousands of years. Yun Nuoxing sighed. He turned his head around inadvertently and realized that there were quite a number of people standing there. He was stunned. It seemed that someone had followed them to the 9th palace. However, it was a pity that there was nothing in the most important palace. The only thing that existed was Little Purple Soul, who had come here for some unknown reason. Thinking of this, Yun Nuoxing suddenly froze and hurriedly raised his head, only to discover that the light blue ring of fire had unknowingly disappeared. When he entered, he clearly felt the aura of the divine flame, and the purple night dark flame was fluctuating. Clearly, the light blue flame that disappeared should also be a type of divine flame, but he did not know where it went. Everyone, please go back. There's nothing left in this palace. It's just a waste of time to stay here. Yun Nuoxing turned around and looked at the crowd. He was in a good mood and could not help but smile. When the people heard this, they frowned slightly. They looked at Yun Nuoxing and then looked at Little Purple Soul in his arms. Their frowns deepened. After thinking for a while, they looked away. There were so many people here. Even if there was something wrong with this little girl, they could not do anything to her. Not to mention Yun Nuoxing, who gave off an extremely dangerous feeling, there were a few genuine netherworld kings around him. Seeing the strange looks from these people, Yun Nuoxing only smiled faintly. He scanned the palace and confirmed that there was really nothing left. Then, he led the crowd and walked towards the huge glass mirror. He jumped into the mirror and disappeared. The people in the palace looked at each other and felt a little angry. They felt that Yun Nuoxing's arrival had disrupted their rhythm. However, they had forgotten that without Yun Nuoxing's glazed pagoda, it was impossible for them to enter the 9th temple. Yun Nuoxing was also the first one to crack the spatial tunnel. It could be said that these people were just following him. Now that Yun Nuoxing and the others had left, they heaved a sigh of relief. They were still unwilling to give up and continued to search the 9th temple, hoping to find something that they had missed. 100 miles away from Lihuan City, there were no clouds in the sky. Even the sunlight seemed a little lazy. After a moment of silence, a 7-colored light surged in the space. Then, a glass mirror slowly opened up in the void and expanded to a size of 1,000 feet. After the mirror appeared, the figures of Yun Nuoxing and the others also walked out of the mirror. Feeling the rich wind elements circling around their bodies, they were slightly stunned. Looking at the familiar twin stars in the sky, time seemed to have stopped for a few seconds. Then, joy crazily washed through everyone's mind. Ah woo! We're finally out! The sun that we have not seen for a long time. It's finally not glass. Fresh air. That damn Jiucheng Hall is so damn stuffy. These old bones can be used to make soup at home. The first person in history. Roar. Let's go to the restaurant to celebrate. Words of joy and roars of ecstasy reverberated in the sky. This time, they were laughing without any restraint, as if they wanted to turn everything that had happened in the past few days into laughter and spit it all out. Yuan Shi, Jin Heng, and the others could even be seen dancing in the sky. The group of people were shouting and dancing at the top of their lungs like a group of demons dancing in the sky. Let's go. Don't shout here. Let's go back to the city to rest. We'll find another restaurant to eat and drink. The Gold God King laughed loudly. Boundless rays of light submerged half of the sky, causing everyone to curse loudly. Let's go. Let's go back to the city. The group of people left behind sounds of laughter. They turned into streaks of light and shot across the sky, rushing towards distant Seoul City. The travel-worn group of people directly barged into the largest restaurant in distant Seoul City. Not only did they book the entire place, but they also ate, drank, and had fun until late at night. Many corpses were left in the hall. The few God Kings also went crazy. At this moment, they finally managed to expel the smell of alcohol from their bodies. They shook their heads helplessly when they saw the drunken group. Yun Nuoxing, who never drank, was already moving the group. When she saw that the God Kings had woken up, she heaved a sigh of relief. She pulled them back to their rooms, and then she sent Xian back to her room. This girl kept clinging to the corner of his clothes, which made him feel very helpless. She was clearly drunk, but she was as quiet as a princess. When he was in the hall just now, he saw the flowers suddenly change their style when they were drunk, which gave him a fright. In the room, after settling Xian and the two girls down, Yun Nuoxing, who was no longer sleepy, slowly walked to the balcony. She raised her head and looked at the round disc that was a little chip. She was in an exceptionally good mood. Sister Yuan, I've found little Z. I can relax now. Where did you guys go? Yun Nuoxing sighed as she stared blankly at the ice-blue moon. However, when she remembered that Yuan had left with Yulong, she relaxed a little. She thought that they would not encounter any danger. Brother! Little Purple Soul's voice rang out behind her. Yun Nuoxing was slightly stunned. She turned around and saw her standing behind her, looking up at her. She could not help but smile. She picked her up and said gently, "Aren't you going to sleep? I've slept for a long time. I don't want to sleep." Little Purple Soul shook her head. She looked around mysteriously. When she saw that no one was around, she put her little hand into her pocket. After rummaging for a long time, she took out something. She then carefully extended it to Yun Nuoxing and said, "Brother, this is for you." Yun Nuoxing tilted her head. She freed one of her hands and reached out to Little Purple Soul's little fist. She took the thing that she put down and looked at it suspiciously. Then, her eyes suddenly narrowed. In her palm, a badge that was less than a finger wide lay quietly. It was glazed and gave off an ancient aura. A towering tree had taken root and sprouted on a green lotus. It looked strange and holy at the same time, as if it was hinting at something. Of course, Yun Nuoxing had seen this mark many times. What shocked her was not the badge. When she accidentally scanned it with her soul energy, she felt a wave of information coming back to her. It was a bit like a cultivation technique. This is the Glazed God's Inheritance. Chapter 356. In his palm, the glazed emblem glowed brilliantly under the moonlight. A huge wave of information surged into Yun Nuoxing's soul like a shockwave. When Yun Nuoxing noticed it, it was too late for him to throw it away. He could only feel a wave of energy surging into his soul. Boom! The wave of information passed through the god's mark and collided with his soul. The sudden impact was so strong that his vision turned black. Countless stars appeared in his eyes. He staggered a few steps back and slumped into a chair. His head hung low, scaring Little Purple Soul. "Brother? Are you okay?" Little Purple Soul called out to Yun Nuashing as she held his arm and shook it. Little Purple Soul put her hand under Yun Nuashing's nose. After sensing that his breathing was stable, she heaved a sigh of relief. She looked at the empty balcony, then at the two girls lying on the bed. Finally, she looked at Yun Nuashing. She took his windbreaker from the house, climbed onto the table carefully, and put it on his back. After she was done, she sat down and looked at him with her chin resting on her hand. Little Purple Soul waited until midnight, but Yun Nuashing still hadn't woken up. His body was glowing, and the lotus tree emblem in his palm was burning. It seemed like something was changing. Seeing him like this, she didn't want to disturb him. "Ha!" Little Purple Soul covered her mouth and yawned. She pouted and looked at Yun Nuashing for a while. She mumbled and stood up from the chair. She snuggled into Yun Nuashing's arms, pulled his windbreaker up, and fell asleep using him as a pillow. In the spiritual world, Yun Nuashing slowly opened his eyes. He was holding a burning emblem in his palm, and it was spinning. He looked at it, and in his mind, a mass of information was rolling and engraved into his soul. He only let out a sigh of relief when the emblem stopped burning. He then rubbed his head. Glazed mirror, it also contains several kinds of absolute arts and… Yun Nuashing sighed. Thinking of the information that had just flowed through his mind, his cheeks could not help but twitch as he muttered, "There's actually a secret technique that involves the time domain, zero-time realm, time realm. Once a realm was opened, the user could control the flow of time within it." It was a simple sentence, but Yun Nuashing couldn't help but gasp. If he could control time, who in the world would be his opponent? It could be said that as long as this realm was opened, the power of life and death would be in the hands of the user. But unfortunately, Yun Nuashing hadn't reached the level where he could control time. There was no other reason. He hadn't mastered the power of time. Even if he had this realm, he couldn't use it. The time realm, as the name implied, didn't have the power of time. How could he use such a realm? It's useless. After the surprise, Yun Nuashing could only sigh. He hadn't even mastered the power of space, so how could he master the power of time? Damn it, it's still too early to learn this. This should be left for gods, people at the level of gods to learn. However, it inexplicably fell into the hands of a tiny immortal realm cultivator like me. It's a bit of a waste of natural resources. Forget it, I'll learn it later. With a wry smile, Yun Nuashing could only suppress the idea of learning it thoroughly. Then, he began to study another mystic technique. Glazed mirror, no grade. With a thought, you can move all things in the world. You can transform your body into heaven and earth. You can take the world as your own body. Glazed divine crystal will cast your body, making it unshakable. The glazed mirror can condense the power of the mystic technique. When practiced to great success, it can allow the mystic technique to break through its limits and increase its power exponentially. Seeing the large glazed words reverberating in his mind, Yun Nuashing could feel the overbearing power of this mystic technique. This was a mystic technique that used energy to temper and strengthen the body. However, when he saw the words glazed divine crystal, Yun Nuashing's jaw almost dropped. What was a glazed divine crystal? It was a dignified level 12 material exclusive to the gods. Many people didn't even have time to worship it after obtaining it, but now it was being used to cast one's body. Moreover, the glazed mirror was divided into 4 levels: cast glazed, glazed body, glazed soul, and glazed divine crystal. It seemed that a lot of glazed divine crystal was used to advance to each level. This Yun Nuoshing stuffed his jaw back with great difficulty. He sighed heavily, as if he wanted to let out all the shock that he had just received. As a level 12 material, it was needless to say that it was precious. Although the realm of the gods was boundless, glazed divine crystals were not that easy to be born. Even if they were born, it might not be possible to find them. Unless Yun Nuoshing was the reincarnation of a heavenly pulse master, he could only stare helplessly at this mystic technique. No, in the ring that Xian Yin gave me. After staring helplessly for a while, Yun Nuoshing suddenly thought of the two rings. He couldn't help but be stunned. Then, he was slightly delighted. He remembered that when he was wandering around in the ring out of boredom, he found a lump of crystal in a corner. The whole thing was colored glaze. The gradual change of the 7 colors made him pay extra attention. It seemed like that was a glazed divine crystal? It's all thanks to Xian Yin. This heavenly god glaze is really something else. She's cultivating a secret technique, yet she still needs glazed godly crystals. Yun Nuoshing smiled, then shook his head. When other heavenly gods obtained 12th level materials, they would use them to forge eternal divine weapons or even godhead weapons. In this flood of information, he did see the cultivation technique, but it was only the first stage of the glazed treasured mirror. As for the rest, there was only the name and no cultivation technique. Even the zero-time realm was only half of the introduction. Incomplete. Yun Nuoshing immediately thought of this possibility, and his gloomy expression deepened. It wasn't easy to obtain it, but it was incomplete. Could it still be inside? Suddenly looking at the lotus tree emblem in his palm, Yun Nuoshing's spirit shook slightly. The emblem just now burned for a long time and didn't melt. Moreover, there was an unusually dense spiritual energy within it. Yun Nuoshing tried a few times, using his soul, mind, elements, and the power of the stars, but he still couldn't break it. He could only give up helplessly. Seems like I'm not strong enough to open it. Yun Nuoshing sighed and could only suppress his desire to learn it directly. However, he couldn't learn it now even if he obtained it. After all, he hadn't even stepped into the first stage. What was the use of seeing the second stage of the cultivation technique? Looking at the 2 rings on his left hand, Yun Nuoshing looked at the silver-white rings. Suddenly, a beautiful silver-white figure appeared in his mind. Every frown and smile of the young girl was vivid in his mind, making him miss her very much. Little girl. He smiled helplessly and looked at the 2 rings. In the purple-red ring, there were some cultivation techniques, secret techniques, arrays, charms, and other things. Although he hadn't learned them before, he had taken a cursory look and discovered that there were actually saint-level cultivation techniques and mystic techniques inside. The lowest level was immortal level, and there were even peerless level ones. However, there were fewer of them. It seemed that Yun Nuoshing hadn't been able to collect too many of these highest-level cultivation techniques. However, when Yun Nuoshing saw it for the first time, his jaw dropped. This peerless-level cultivation technique, he had never seen it anywhere else in the outside world. He hadn't even heard of any cultivation techniques or secret techniques of this level appearing in the outside world. However, there were more than 10 scrolls in his hand. He suddenly felt that this ring was too heavy, as if a star was pressing down on his finger. It was so heavy that his finger was about to break. The other silver-white ring, on the other hand, was filled with a pile of elixirs and materials. The level of these items was also so high that it was suffocating. His mind entered the silver-white ring, and Yun Nuoshing slowly searched for a while. Then, he opened his eyes and touched it gently with his finger. A gradually changing rainbow light suddenly bloomed from the ring. Then, a crystal the size of a wash-basin appeared in front of him, causing his face to twitch. Such a big piece. Let me see. SSS, the weight should be just right. It should be able to reach the first level. I bought a watch last year. Yun Nuoshing thought for a while and then cursed loudly. This washbasin-sized piece was just enough to enter the first level of normal cultivation. This is a cultivation technique for the rich. Appraisal complete. Yun Nuoxing ground his teeth. Suddenly, he felt his teeth itch and wanted to bite something. Sigh, so be it. For the sake of my cultivation path, this can't be helped. Yun Nuoxing muttered with a bitter face. However, his heart was bleeding. His heart ached for having to refine such a big piece of colored glass divine crystal in one go. First, use the origin energy and a powerful flame to refine and temper the colored glass divine crystal. Yun Nuoxing smiled after he finished reading. What kind of flame was stronger than a divine flame? The surrounding light purple sea of fire was attracted and surged toward the washbasin-sized colored glass divine crystal in front of Yun Nuoxing. Colored glass energy also surged out of his body and entered the flames to refine the colored glass divine crystal together. Chapter 357. When Yun Nuoxing woke up, he found himself lying on a bed. In such a large room, there was not a single person in sight. He was a little surprised and then laughed bitterly. Since when did he care so much about whether there was anyone beside him? He tossed and turned comfortably on the soft bed for a while, twisting his body in an intoxicated manner until the bed was wrinkled. Only then did he stop. He was still refining the glazed divine crystal in his spiritual world. Even with the purple night flame, it was impossible to refine it all at once. It was difficult to refine a 12th-level divine object. He wouldn't be surprised even if it took a few years. Unless his strength reached the demigod or demigod rank, the refining speed would be faster. Other than that, he could only take it slowly. Hugging the soft blanket and rolling from one end of the bed to the other, Yun Nuoxing breathed a sigh of relief. He was a little tired from running around during this period. He had never been so busy before. After coming out of the Tana's water god temple, he came to Lihuan City after resting for half a month. Then, he ran around in the underground palace for a whole month, which surprised him a little. During that time, he didn't see the night. He didn't expect that it had already been a month. Creak. Just as Yun Nuoxing was happily rolling on the bed, the door was suddenly pushed open gently. Then, a tall and beautiful figure walked in quietly, drawing a slender shadow in the sunlight. The girl who pushed open the door gently closed the door. Seeing the messy bed and Yun Nuoxing who was entangled with the quilt a few times, her beautiful eyes flashed with a hint of astonishment, then it turned into surprise, and finally it turned into a little smile. Little Star's sleeping posture is so cute. The person who came was naturally Xian. Seeing that Yun Nuoxing still had his eyes closed, she couldn't help but chuckle. She walked lightly to the bedside and sat down gently. Her jade-like hand rested on her cheek, and she stared at the handsome face without blinking. The corners of her mouth curled up at an angle that made people drool. "Little Star," Xian called out softly. She waited for a while, and after confirming that he didn't seem to show any signs of waking up, the smile on her red lips grew even longer. She placed her jade-like hands on Yun Nuoxing's handsome face and gently stroked it. Her jade-like fingers lightly brushed past his forehead, eyes, nose, and lips. She was careful and meticulous as if she was examining a work of art. In the end, she couldn't help but poke his face. Xian pursed her red lips and hesitated for a moment. She brushed her long hair away from her forehead and slowly bent down. Her red lips were like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water as she lightly kissed Yun Nuoxing on the lips. Ever since that day, she would occasionally give Yun Nuoxing a sneak attack, which made him feel helpless and at a loss. He never thought that this girl would be so bold. "Little lazy bum," Xian gently smiled and gently sat up. She took out a book and quietly read it. Half an hour later, Xian saw that Yun Nuoxing still hadn't woken up. She couldn't help but shake her head and poke his cheek with her jade-like fingers. She couldn't bear to wake him up, so she quietly left the room. The room was silent for a long time. Suddenly, A majestic and obscure soul energy reverberated and surged towards the door. After sensing it for a while, Yun Nuoshing, who was lying on the bed, suddenly blushed. He opened his eyes in embarrassment, and his light purple eyes turned red. This girl, this little girl. Thinking back to the scene just now, Yun Nuoshing was so embarrassed that he wanted to bury his head in the blankets. He gently stroked his lips with his fingers. The touch of softness from just now seemed to still be there, and a faint fragrance left behind. This girl is getting bolder and bolder. Yun Nuoshing bitterly laughed. His chest was beating like a drum. It was so restless that it was difficult to calm down. Ah! Yun Nuoshing shouted in embarrassment and anger. He hugged the blankets and rolled around on the bed. His legs kicked wildly, and he even kicked a pillow. The bed was almost indescribably messy. The sheets and blankets were tangled around his body, and he was tied up. Ugh! I can't untie it. After getting tired from rolling, Yun Nuoshing sighed. When he wanted to get up, he realized that his hands and feet were tied. Ah! Yun Nuoshing finally understood what it meant to be tied up in a cocoon. Right now, he was completely tied up in a ball. No matter how he looked at it, he looked like a big fat worm that had spun silk and turned into a cocoon. Zai, save me, you asked for it. This big fat cocoon looks pretty good. Keep it up. Zai seemed to have just woken up. He glanced at the current situation and fell asleep again. I'm crying. After struggling for a long time, Yun Nuoshing realized that he was sweating all over in vain. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but Zai didn't help him. Brother Nuoshing, call me and I'll untie you. At this time, Lan Xian suddenly appeared. She lay on the bed and looked at Yun Nuoshing, who was sweating profusely, and teased him. Yun Nuoshing was stunned. He looked at Lan Xian's bright blue eyes, which contained a smile. His face twitched, but he turned his head away and laughed dryly. I can untie it myself. Then you won't be so busy and sweating. Lan Xian smiled as she looked at him, who was struggling in vain. Her legs kept moving up and down behind him. She rested her chin on her jade-like hand and smiled like a flower. I'm about to untie it. When Yun Nuoshing heard this, he was a little embarrassed. He quickly kicked his legs and tried to get away. In the end, he was tied even deeper. He didn't know why there was a knot inside. After a long while, Yun Nuoshing stopped struggling. He looked at Lan Xian, who was still smiling like a daffodil. His handsome face turned red, and he said, Xian, untie me. When Lan Xian heard this, her smile became even more charming. However, she said, Huh? Brother Nuoshing, what did you say? I didn't hear you clearly. Yun Nuoshing was about to cry. He gritted his teeth and quickly moved closer to Lan Xian. He said sweetly, Xian, hee. Lan Xian smiled knowingly. Then, she slowly got up and peeled off the cocoon from the outside. Phew! Yun Nuoshing climbed out of the blanket and heaved a sigh of relief. He looked at Lan Xian, who was smiling at him. He smiled and patted her head. Thank you, Xian. You can't just thank me. Lan Xian shook her head. Then, she moved her beautiful face closer to Yun Nuoshing. Her meaning was self-evident, ahem. Yun Nuoshing coughed dryly. He rubbed her long hair and said, Let's go out and see where everyone has gone. Brother Nuoshing favors one and discriminates against the other. You obviously kissed little Ming and little Z. We are all your sisters, but you only ignored me. When Lan Xian heard this, she pouted her lips and looked as if she had been wronged. However, her bright eyes stared at Yun Nuoshing. Ahem. How old are you? Why are you still fighting with the two little girls? Yun Nuoshing's handsome face turned red as he said weakly. No, you kiss me. I will tell you a piece of news. It is related to Kanzaki. Lan Xian shook her head. Then, she hugged Yun Nuoshing's arm and shook it. She said in a sweet voice, Brother. Yun Nuoshing was so shocked that he had goosebumps all over his body. Then, he smiled bitterly as he looked at Lan Xian's expectant eyes. He felt that he had really been defeated by these little girls. He didn't know what he had done in his previous life. Letting out a sigh, Yun Nuoshing lowered his head and poked Lan Xian's beautiful face. Then, he turned away his blushing face and said, "Are you happy now?" "Yes, yes." Lan Xian smiled sweetly. Then, she ran her fingers through her hair and said with a smile, "Heavenly Goddess Glaze is from the mythological era." "Oh." Yun Nuoshing, who was still unsettled, nodded sullenly. After a while, he suddenly felt that something was wrong. He blinked and quickly turned his head. He stared at Lan Xian and said, "What did you say? Heavenly Goddess Glaze is from the mythological era? Didn't Jin Wang and the others say that Heavenly Goddess Glaze was from the ancient era? It was 2 eras away from this era." It didn't seem like they were lying. Jin Wang and the others couldn't have tricked him. Although Yu Shao had tricked him before, yes, Celestial God Glaze is a person from the mythological era. Its rise is very strange. It's as if another person suddenly appeared. No one knew who Glaze was before, and no one even knew its gender. However, it transcended and became a celestial god overnight. On the day the Glaze divine god succeeded, 3 suns appeared in the sky. The color of Glaze illuminated more than half of the galaxy. A towering ancient tree growing on a lotus covered the entire divine realm. All the experts were alarmed. Although there were many divine realm experts at that time, the phenomenon of heaven and earth on the day of transcendence and ascension to godhood wasn't that great. Therefore, it was engraved in people's hearts and became one of the legends of that time. But after that, Heavenly Goddess Glaze went silent again. No one saw her. It was as if she had disappeared. When I saw Brother Nuoshing's lotus tree emblem, I remembered this matter. I have seen this emblem before. The charm is exactly the same. I can't be wrong. So, I'll tell you about it, Lan Xian said. Yun Nuoshing was stunned. After listening to Lan Xian, she shivered. The lotus tree was the unique emblem of Heavenly Goddess Glaze. If someone had imitated it, it might be understandable. However, even the charm was the same. This was something that could not be imitated. In other words, the Heavenly Goddess Glaze that Lan Xian was talking about should be the same person as the Heavenly Goddess Glaze that Jin Wang and the others had talked about. However, the 2 titles were the same, yet there was a gap of more than an era between them. How could this be explained? No one could live for such a long time. Even the gods couldn't live for such a long time. Even the divine grade Xian crystals couldn't seal the fluctuations of the divine right of a divine god. As time passed, it would gradually be worn away. Then how did divine god Glaze survive for more than 20 eras? Although I don't know the details, Heavenly Goddess Glaze did leave a stir in the mythological era. So, she is from the mythological era. However, I don't know how she survived until the ancient era. Lan Xian nodded affirmatively. Xian, do you know any other gods who have lived for more than an era? Yun Nuoshing suddenly asked. Lan Xian frowned. After thinking for a while, she said, "I don't know everything. When I was born, I was at the end of the mythological era. In the ancient books that I have read, I didn't see any gods who survived the beginning of the mythological era and reached the end of the mythological era. Most of the gods died in less than 10 eras. The longest one was 30 eras. That was the god who had survived the longest. Moreover, he had used all kinds of methods to prolong his life to live for more than 10 eras. Ordinary gods could only live for a few eras. What's the name of the deity that has lived for 30 eras? Yun Nuoshing's heart skipped a beat and he quickly asked. I don't know. Lan Xian sighed and shook her head. I see. Yun Nuoshing nodded in disappointment. The mythological era was the era of the gods. Even in that era, no god could live for more than 30 eras. It was unlikely that there would be any in the current era. If Brother Nuashing wants to know more, you can look for a family. Seeing his disappointed look, Lon Exhilarating winked at Mei Mao and suddenly smiled. When Yun Nuashing heard this, a name appeared in his mind. He blurted out, "The Soul family?" "Yes, it is the family of the man that Brother Nuashing saw the other day. Exhilarating once said that this family rose quietly during the mythological era. At that time, they were quite mysterious. Maybe they have passed down something." Lon Exhilarating nodded and said. Yun Nuashing was silent for a while. He sat on the bed and clenched his fists before loosening them. After a while, his eyes suddenly lit up. He sighed and said with a smile, "All right, I'll make a trip there when I have time." Chapter 358. A long time after Lon Sheener returned to the Sky Piercer and disappeared, Yun Nuashing was still sitting on the bed. His chin was resting on the back of his hands, and his slender eyebrows were tightly knitted. After a long time, he sighed, as he could not think of any clues. Slowly opening the treasure map, Yun Nuashing looked at his current location, and then he was stunned. His eyes swept back and forth around the red dot several times. After a while, he suddenly raised his head and looked in front of him in astonishment. He said to himself in a daze, "The divine flame is gone?" Originally, there should have been a light blue divine flame near the place he had seen. However, at this moment that area was empty. There was nothing, except for some threads that crossed the area. Has it been subdued? Yun Nuashing frowned as he thought of this possibility. Then, he looked back at the Taiyuan territory. After finding Red Star City, he looked to the right. The place where the purple night flame was originally marked, the light purple flame mark had also disappeared. Only then did he realize that the mark on the map would automatically erase once it was subdued. TSK, that is to say, there are dozens of divine objects in this world waiting to be subdued? Suddenly, Yun Nuashing thought of something. He suddenly raised his head and looked at the flames and lightning arranged on the map. Stars appeared in his eyes. Since the marks on the map would disappear after they were subdued, then the marks that were still on the map had not been subdued and were still there? Sigh, what a pity! However, when he thought of the light blue divine flame that had brushed past him, Yun Nuashing sighed and shook his head. Originally, he wanted to subdue the light blue divine flame on the way out of the underground palace. However, when he came out, it was already gone. It seemed that someone had discovered its trace early, and then took advantage of the group of people to subdue it in the underground palace. You can have your cake and eat it too. Obtaining the inheritance of the divine glaze god is also a kind of blessing. I should be content. Yun Nuashing spread out his hands and sighed helplessly. The divine flame and the inheritance of the god of heaven were both extremely precious items. It was hard to say which of the two was more valuable, but one thing was for sure, obtaining one was already being favored by the god of heaven. If he wanted to obtain both at once, he was a little greedy. Casually putting the treasure map aside, Yun Nuashing took out the star map. The octagonal altar was still very dim. Although she had retrieved 2 fragments, it was obviously not completely repaired. The core of the altar was still dim. Compared to when she first obtained it, it was indeed brighter. Unfortunately, it was still the light of a firefly. The array inside was too damaged, and it was difficult to activate. Hey, star map, where are your fragments? If you can tell me, just tell me so I don't have to run all over the world, Yun Nuashing said mysteriously as she hugged the altar. Buzz! Just as she finished speaking, spots of light suddenly lit up on the altar. 8 small balls of light suddenly appeared at the tips of the 8 long horns. Yun Nuashing was stunned. She hurriedly looked over, not knowing what had happened. As soon as the 8 balls of light appeared, they left the tips and gathered at the center. A moment later, they turned into a ray of light and shot into the treasure map that was placed aside. Buzz! A slight buzzing sound came from the treasure map. Then, Yun Nuoshing was surprised to see that some similar markings gradually appeared in some of the blank areas on the map. The markings were in the shape of small altars. They were completely a miniature version of the star map. They were scattered from the Taiyuan domain to the Kuan-Yuan domain, and even the Divine Prefecture and the northern and southern ice realms. The largest part of the Divine Prefecture had more than a dozen markings. Could this be the location of the fragments of the star map? Yun Nuoshing tilted her head and muttered. Thinking of this possibility, she was slightly happy. If that was the case, it would save her a lot of time. However, when she finished looking at the locations of the fragments, her smiling face suddenly froze. Her eyes widened. They are distributed in all 7 major domains, and they are not concentrated, and some fragments are actually in the restricted area. After Yun Nuoshing finished looking, she resisted the urge to curse. She took a deep breath and forced herself to calm down. So what if they are in the restricted area? It's not like I haven't been there before. Yun Nuoshing did not know whether to laugh or cry. She could only comfort him like this. However, in general, letting him know where the fragments of the star map were could save him a lot of time. Although there were some places that he did not want to go, for the sake of this magical item, he could only hold his breath. After all, Xian Yin had told him about the use of the star map. It could be used to teleport at will. Even if he was not proficient in coordinates, it would not be a problem. As long as the star map was spread out, he would be able to teleport there. Are you very confused? Ziye's voice quietly rang out in her heart, causing Yun Nuoshing to be slightly stunned. Before she could regain her senses, a ball of light purple flames rose from her hand. Then, it formed the shape of a person. The flames gradually dissipated, and an exquisite oval face appeared. Her light purple hair gently fell on the bed and curled up. Her slender body was straight and flexible, and her purple clothes outlined a few moving curves. On her indifferent face, a pair of light purple eyes looked at Yun Nuoshing. Why do you say that? Yun Nuoshing finally reacted. She looked at her and asked. It's just a feeling. Ziyi shook his head. Mei Mao stared straight at that handsome face and said, I just feel that you seem to be very tired. Although you're always running around, I can feel that you're a little lost. You don't know how to move forward, right? Hearing this, Yun Nuoshing was stunned. She stared at that pair of charming eyes, and an inexplicable light flowed in her eyes. After a long time, she shifted her gaze to the side. She sighed and nodded. What could she hide from this roundworm in his stomach? What he thought was the same as what she knew. He indeed felt a little lost and did not know how to move forward. Opening her arms, she fell straight onto the bed. Sighing, Yun Nuoshing said softly, Yes. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to move forward. I keep feeling tired and don't know what to do. Although I've said before that I'm going to find the ruins of the gods to understand my origins, where can I find it? How can I find it? The mythological era has disappeared without a trace. It has been worn away by the passage of time. There won't be many things left. Even if I can find 1 or 2 places now, what should I do in the end? I haven't found anything related to myself. Yun Nuoshing sighed again. There was a deep sense of fatigue in her voice. Ziyi turned around. Her slender legs were curled up, and she rested her chin on her knees. Tilting her head, she looked at Yun Nuoshing and asked, Why are you so conflicted? Yun Nuoshing raised her head and looked at her in confusion. What can't you let go of in your heart? Ziyi said softly, Although I know that you're a very conflicted person, I've never seen you so conflicted. What can't I let go of? Yun Nuoshing was stunned. After thinking for a moment, she said, It should be Xianin. She said that I used to. But, so you can't wait to understand your past, right? Ziyi asked. Plus, what I saw at the reincarnation lake, so. Yun Nuoshing nodded. She laughed bitterly and said self-deprecatingly, Have I gone mad? Ziyi didn't say anything when she heard that. Her bright eyes looked ahead quietly. Yun Nuoshing didn't say anything when she saw her like this. She just stared blankly at the ceiling. After a long time, Ziyi sighed softly and said, "Little star, didn't you say that you don't care what happened in the past?" Yun Nuoshing was stunned. She nodded and said, "I think I did say that." "Then why are you conflicted now?" Sigh. Yun Nuoshing's mouth was gagged. She was stunned for a moment before she smiled bitterly and said, "It's one thing to say it, but it's another thing to actually do it. I can't ignore what happened in the past. It feels like something is missing in my heart, like I've forgotten something. I can't help but feel very uncomfortable." Yun Nuoshing sighed. Her eyes were filled with a sense of vicissitudes. It was as if the person lying here wasn't a young man in his 20s, but an old man who had already seen through the world. He lacked the vitality of a young man. In reality, he didn't know what he was searching for. He just wanted to search subconsciously. He wanted to know, to understand, and to search. He couldn't explain why, but there was a kind of will, a kind of thought that told him that he needed to search. Although it wasn't very urgent, it was magnified a lot by himself. "Do you still remember what Xianyin said?" Ziyi asked calmly. Mei Mao glanced at him. "What did she say?" Yun Nuoshing blinked and was a little confused. "Only when you have complete power will you be able to uncover everything that has been sealed for so long." Zai rolled her eyes at him. She didn't think that he would forget this sentence so quickly. Of course I remember this." Yun Nuoshing nodded. He remembered many things that Xianyin said to him, but he didn't know which sentence Ziyi was referring to. "Then what are you conflicted about? Just focus on improving your strength." Ziyi rolled her eyes and said reproachfully. "But—" Yun Nuoshing was stunned. He wanted to say something, but he realized that he couldn't open his mouth. He felt that it wouldn't be good no matter what he said. Ziyi sighed and lay down. Her jade-like finger flicked Yun Nuoshing's forehead and said, "You always think too much. That's why you're so tired. You don't have to be like this. It's not a bad choice to sit down quietly and cultivate. As a divine physique of spiritual reception, you just have to cultivate until you reach the great accomplishment stage. As for other things, you can do them after you reach the great accomplishment stage." Yun Nuoshing wanted to say something, but Ziyi beat him to it. "Moreover, you said yourself that this life is this life. Why do you have to be so conflicted about your previous life and the forgotten past? Since you've already forgotten it, why do you still have to be conflicted? You said yourself that the past isn't as important as the present, right?" Yun Nuoshing was speechless. This was what he said to Yuyin. He didn't expect her to pay attention to this sentence. "Since you think so, why don't you treat this as a new life? Walk your cultivation path properly. There are so many beautiful women around you. Take your wife to the forbidden area and repair the 5 elements body. After the 2 of you reach the great accomplishment stage, tear down the Qi family and the sacred weapon shrine. Then, take a group of young wives to get married and have a house full of children and grandchildren. Isn't it fine to be an ordinary cultivator?" Ziyi sighed. After Yun Nuoshing heard this, her face twitched. She felt that there were too many things to complain about in this sentence. She didn't know where to start. "Didn't you say that a divine physique of spiritual reception wouldn't be peaceful in its life? How can it be ordinary?" Yun Nuoshing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. As a divine physique of spiritual reception, she had to have the awareness to fight all the way. She forgot where she heard this sentence from. Since it wouldn't be peaceful, how could it be ordinary? "That's what I meant," Ziyi said angrily. "In other words, you think that I should get rid of the path of pursuing the mythological era?" Yun Nuoshing asked. "No, pursue it all the way, but don't do it deliberately. If you can find it, then do it. If you can't find it, then forget it. You should focus on cultivation now. Xianyin also said that once you are strong enough, she will tell you everything you want to know. Then, just focus on cultivating, understand?" Ziyi said as he poked Yun Nuoxing's head. Okay, I understand. I won't pursue it deliberately. Yun Nuoxing nodded with a bitter smile. In a huge palace in the south of the Divine Prefecture, there was a chilling and terrifying energy faintly permeating the air. The fluctuations made the surrounding space tremble. Chi! Suddenly, figures appeared in the huge palace. Then, the space shattered and several figures walked out. They stood quietly in the sky, but the space was under great pressure. There was a strong and cold aura quietly permeating the air. Second brother. One of the figures standing in the sky walked out and said respectfully. Judging by his appearance, it was Chi Yu, whose hand had been cut off by Yun Nuoxing. However, judging by his appearance, he seemed to have completely recovered. When this voice rang out, the space slowly distorted. A moment later, a white figure slowly appeared, and an indifferent voice rang out. The spiritual divine body is still in Lihuan City? Yes, when the arrest warrant was issued, someone provided us with the information. We also went to check. It is indeed still there. It has not left. Chi Yu nodded and said, Okay, let's go. The white figure nodded gently. Then, with a shake of his body, he disappeared as if he had never appeared. When the white figure disappeared, Chi Yu and the few people beside him raised their heads and looked at the northern sky. They all sneered. The battle for the spiritual divine body will be started by the Qi family. Chapter 359. Yun Nuoxing's hand inadvertently touched the jade pendant tied to her waist. She paused for a moment before gently taking it off. She held it in her hand and gently stroked it. Yun Nuoxing let out a light breath and could not help but smile. After that girl gave this to you, you've always hung it around your waist. You haven't even touched it. I thought you didn't care about it at all or had forgotten about it, but now you remember? Seeing this, Zai could not help but snort. What nonsense are you spouting? Yun Nuoxing rolled her eyes. Some golden light appeared on her finger and poured into the jade pendant, as if she was refining it. After doing this, she said, I cherish it. What's the use of thinking about someone when you see something? That girl is right beside you, yet you don't want her. You just have to look at a jade pendant. Can't you just accept her? Zai rolled her eyes and continued to snort. Yun Nuoxing looked at her with hidden bitterness, and then pulled her over. Moving his claws like the wind, he rubbed her soft long hair into a mess and said, You little roundworm in my stomach, shouldn't you know what I'm thinking? Zai muttered as she gently pushed Yun Nuoxing away. After tidying up her hair, she rolled her eyes at him and said, Of course I know what you're thinking. Aren't I just trying to persuade you? When will I be able to hold a baby if you keep going like this? Zai sighed. Of course she knew. She knew even better than he did. This guy's feelings were like a block of ice that was difficult to melt. He seemed to be very close to others, but no one could touch that part of his heart. Zai actually felt a bit of sympathy for Xian. Of all the people she liked, she just had to like this strange guy. Yun Nuoxing's face darkened. He really could not understand why Zai wanted to put him together with Xian. This was also a huge question mark in his heart. Yun Nuoxing looked at the blanket to the side, then looked at Zai, who was lying on the bed and playing with her long hair in boredom. She suddenly smiled strangely and grabbed the blanket over. What? You still want to sleep? You've already slept for 3 days. You still want to sleep? Ziyi saw him grab the blanket and thought that he was going to sleep again. She couldn't help but rebuke, Go out first. Jin Wang and the others seem to be looking for you. Oh, I'll go out in a bit. Yun Nuoxing smiled and nodded. Wait. Violet Knight was taken aback. She turned her gaze over in confusion, only to see a flash of white suddenly cover her. It was so fast that she couldn't react in time. Stinky girl. Yun Nuoxing laughed sinisterly and pounced on Ziyi like a hungry wolf. She grabbed the blanket and covered Ziye's body with it. Then, she pushed Ziye's delicate body and made her roll on the bed, rolling the blanket up like a spring roll. Little star, you. Violet Night was pushed and rolled a few times like a gourd. Her hands and feet were tied up. When her vision returned to normal, she saw Yun Nuoshing looking at her with a sinister smile. Her body was wrapped in a few layers of blanket. She was stunned and asked, "What are you doing?" "Rolling a spring roll." Yun Nuoshing laughed and pulled the blanket over. She wrapped it around Ziyi and rolled her up a few times. In just a few seconds, a big, fat spring roll appeared on the bed. Ziyi was trapped in it and couldn't move. Yun Nuoshing put a pillow behind her. Yun Nuoshing jumped off the bed and clapped her hands casually, fixing Ziyi's body in place so that she couldn't turn into flames. She snorted softly. "Humph, you didn't save me just now." Ziyi looked at her resentfully. She struggled for a while and gave up. "Hurry up and untie me." "Humph, I'll let you out after I'm done talking. In the meantime, you'll warm my bed." Yun Nuoshing smiled and walked to the door. Just as he was about to open the door and walk out, he was stunned. He couldn't bear to look at Ziyi. When Ziyi saw this, she turned Maimao around. Then, she put on a pitiful look and looked at Yun Nuoshing with watery eyes. She imitated Xian Yin's tone and said, "Brother, Yi was wrong. Let me go." Yun Nuoshing shuddered and rolled his eyes. How could he not see that Ziyi was pretending to be pitiful? He hesitated for a while, sighed, and walked back to the bed. He opened the spring roll quickly and said helplessly, "I'm not playing anymore." Ziyi giggled. As soon as she was free, she wrapped her soft arms around Yun Nuoshing's neck and gave him a big hug. Then, she kissed him on the forehead and turned back into flames and burrowed into his body. Yun Nuoshing rolled his eyes and strode out of the room. After walking out of the room, Yun Nuoshing realized that they seemed to have moved to another place. They were in a courtyard and were no longer in the restaurant. He didn't know who moved him here. Before he walked into the hall, he saw Jin Jinwang and the others sitting at the table. He could feel a murderous atmosphere from afar. The group of juniors hid far away and all of them shrunk their neck. Yun Nuoshing stopped in his tracks in surprise. He took a deep breath and walked in slowly. "What's wrong? What happened? Why are you so serious?" When everyone heard his voice, they turned their gazes. Then, they saw Yun Nuoshing walking in slowly. His expression was much more serious. The latter felt that he had come at the wrong time. No matter how he looked at it, he felt that there would be a storm coming, alas. Jin Jinwang sighed and picked up a piece of paper from the table. He waved his hand and threw it to Yun Nuoshing. He shook his head helplessly and said, "See for yourself." Yun Nuoshing stepped forward in confusion and caught the paper. Then, he straightened it. Just as he was about to read it, he saw Xian and the others crowding around and craning their necks. Just now, they were intimidated by Jin Jinwang and the others and didn't see it. Now that it fell into Yun Nuoshing's hands, they naturally gathered around curiously. Na Ling Godly Body bullied others and committed all kinds of crimes. He killed geniuses, was as bloodthirsty as a demon, and devoured the origin. He is utterly heartless. We hereby issue a kill order. This person's blood will be used as a sacrifice for the departed souls of the heroes. The Qi family, Sacred Weapon Shrine, Qinghai Palace, Wanyuan Hall, Palace of First Dawn, Seven Stars Hall, Constellations Palace, and Astral Pavilion have jointly issued a reward. 50 kilograms of celestial-grade glazed crystals for information. If captured alive, the reward is 10,000 kilograms of celestial-grade glazed crystals. When Yun Nuoshing finished reading the kill order, he suddenly felt that time and space had stopped. Even the group of people around him were petrified. They all widened their eyes and were dumbfounded. Time and space froze for a moment, and Yun Nuoshing suddenly reacted. He was so angry that smoke was coming out of his 7 orifices. He suddenly tore the kill order in his hand into a pile of pieces, then threw it on the ground and roared, F***CK. What the hell is this? Bloodthirsty as a demon? How the hell am I bloodthirsty? And devoured the origin? Killed geniuses? I haven't even fought with anyone from the younger generation, have I? Yun Nuoshing roared angrily. From the looks of it, he seemed to be on the verge of going berserk at any moment. A pile of divine artifacts appeared due to the fluctuation of his state of mind. A violent energy swept through the entire hall, giving everyone a fright. Ahem. Jin Jinwang coughed dryly. He knocked on the table and said, "Calm down. This matter is neither long nor short. Anyway, it has nothing to do with you. This groundless accusation is too ridiculous." "What?" Yun Nuoshing was stunned. He calmed down and frowned. He said, "It has nothing to do with me? Then, this so-called order to kill." "Sigh, it's like this." Jin Jinwang sighed and explained slowly. "In the glazed divine earth palace, someone followed our footsteps and walked out successfully. However, it's more appropriate to say that they escaped. Because when we were in the Jiucheng Hall, an evil spirit appeared out of nowhere and killed many young experts. He didn't even spare their flesh and blood. The origin of the practitioners was also devoured. I heard that the divine son from the Qinghai Palace, Hejiao, and a few other divine sons were forced to join forces and barely escaped. There aren't many young people with such strength nowadays." "Huh. Even if that's the case, it has nothing to do with me, right? We were the first batch to walk out. What does it have to do with me?" Yun Nuoshing exploded. Even the little phoenix on top of his head was shocked. "Listen to me first." Yun Nuoshing smiled foolishly and his forehead darkened. Everyone was so scared that their clothes were soaked in cold sweat. Anyway, as long as the spiritual body is not destroyed, the divine weapon attached to it will not be destroyed. If that's the case, just take the divine weapon and blow it up. Ling Hongjian, since they want it so much, just send it to him. Haha, the power of a divine weapon is even greater than that of an eternal divine weapon. Will the realm of the gods be blown up? Yun Nuoshing giggled and his white teeth made everyone's heart turn cold. At this moment, everyone finally understood that this calm guy would become abnormally crazy once he went berserk. After all, looking at his expression, he did not seem to be joking at all. "Little star, calm down." Xian quickly grabbed Yun Nuoshing's hand and said softly, "Me? I'm very calm. I'm very calm. I'm so calm that I think it's a good choice to use the Scarlet Cross as a firework." Yun Nuoshing smiled. The more he spoke, the colder everyone felt. "Since the Qi family wants it, I'll give it to him. Since the Qi family wants the Linghong sword so badly, I'll just give it to them. I'll also give them 2 eternal weapons. That quasi-eternal weapon is also a good thing. I believe they'll like dozens of divine weapons. I'll also give them a song as the interest for depositing. Yun Nuoshing laughed strangely. "It's over. This kid is crazy. The Qi family is going crazy too." Everyone smiled bitterly. However, now was not the time to care about the Qi family. They had to find a way to appease this idiot. Chapter 360. Yun Nuoshing sighed and wiped away the cold water dripping from his bangs. He took the towel from Xian and wiped his face. Then he took the cup from Yuan Qian, drank some water, took a deep breath, and spat it out. "Have you calmed down?" The beautiful woman touched his wet head and smiled softly. "Have you gone crazy?" The water god king raised his eyebrows and asked. "You're not going to blow up the eternal weapon, right?" Jin Jinwang asked, holding a small golden array in his hand. "You're not going to play the zither, right?" Huizhu also unfolded a small red array in her hand, as if she was facing a great enemy. "You're not going to blow up half of the area, right?" Lei Tian crossed his arms and asked with 2 arrays floating in front of him. "Can we leave the lunar platform behind?" Qing Feng asked, holding the lapis lazuli pagoda in the air. "You're not going to set off fireworks, right?" Everyone asked in unison. Yun Nuashing sighed and looked at the chains circling around his body. Then he looked up at the lapis lazuli pagoda hanging above his head, and saw the dozens of arrays operating under his feet, making him unable to move. He smiled bitterly and said, "It seems that there is no other choice?" "No," everyone said in unison and shook their heads. "Okay, then I'm not going to blow it up." Yun Nuashing sighed and nodded. If he took out the Netherworld Ruin sword, these things would not be able to control him. He knew that everyone wanted him to calm down, so he could only suppress those crazy thoughts. When everyone heard this, they looked at each other and hesitated for a while. After all, once the restrictions were removed, Yun Nuashing, who had the purest light element, would not be able to capture him again. "Okay, you can't restrain me. If I really wanted to go, I would have gone long ago. Blow up the eternal weapon? I cultivate the divine body of spiritual acceptance and still rely on the eternal weapon. Wouldn't it be a waste to blow it up? It's not easy to find an eternal weapon." Yun Nuashing sighed and smiled. When everyone heard this, they felt that it made sense. They unlocked a bunch of restrictions but did not completely remove them. They kept them in their hands so that they could use them at any time. You don't have to be so vigilant. If I say I'm not going, then I'm really not going. Yun Nuashing smiled and gathered all the water elements on her body before dissipating them in the air. She smiled and said, "What we should do now is to find that evil spirit and clarify things for me." "That's right." Everyone nodded. "That's easy. We just need to find a seer." Yun Nuashing smiled. "It's not that easy to find." Jin Jinwang smiled bitterly. If seers could be found so easily, they wouldn't have been stuck here for so long. Instead, they would have gone out to search for them. "Does the Nine Deities Palace have any relationship with the Divination Pavilion?" Yun Nuashing asked. "The secret pavilion is very mysterious. No one knows where they are located. They will only show their faces occasionally. Not a single power would dare say that they know someone from the secret pavilion." Jin Jinwang said helplessly. No one even knew the location of the Divination Pavilion. It was a completely hidden power. It was difficult to find them, let alone know who they were. Only those who were fated would know one or two seers. "Then how did you get someone from the Divination Pavilion to find me?" Yun Nuashing rolled her eyes. She still remembered that the Nine Deities Palace had searched for them for a long time during the Taiyuan Goddess incident. Well, we used up all the divinations back then. There were only 3 divinations. 3 divinations to your location, and the result was..." Jin Jinwang smiled awkwardly. Back then, they had the divination token, which allowed the Divination Pavilion to make 3 divinations. They had never used it. They had only used it 3 times when they were searching for Yun Nuashing. "Sigh, if I had known, I would have become a seer myself." Yun Nuashing sighed when he heard that. He was a little disappointed by the news. The heaven-defying ultimate god seemed to know him. If he could find the location of the Divination Pavilion, he might be able to get the old man to explain. Now, he could only regret that he was not a seer. Otherwise, the problem would have been solved easily. Now, let's solve the problem at hand first. The Golden God King spread out his hands and said, "Right now, many forces are looking for you. Although this place won't be found for a while, you can't always hide here and not come out. I think someone has already calculated this place." Just as he finished speaking, he suddenly felt the entire manor tremble. Then, a cold roar filled with endless killing intent resounded in the sky. Jin Jinwang, hand over the divine body of spiritual reception. Is the Nine Deities Palace trying to shelter an evil spirit? Boom! The shout was heard and Jin Jinwang's expression instantly changed. Everyone suddenly stood up and looked outside the manor with cold eyes. "Speak of the devil, and he will appear." Jin Jinwang took a deep breath and looked at the others with a solemn expression. He nodded and said, "The signal has been sent. The Nine Deities Palace might be coming to support us soon." "Why do I feel that you don't have any confidence at all?" Yun Nuoxing's cheeks twitched. Aren't there too many uncertain words? Jin Jinwang laughed dryly and gave the water god king a look. The latter nodded knowingly and stepped out slowly. The seal in his hand changed, and the space in the courtyard suddenly distorted. The barrier in the sky fluctuated and ripples spread out. The space shook for a moment, and after it stabilized, the situation outside clearly appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Hiss! When the crowd saw the scenery outside, they all sucked in a breath of cold air. Now, the sky above Lihuan City was already surrounded by an overwhelming number of people. Cold frost permeated the entire city, and not far in the sky in front of them, nearly 100 figures stood in the void. Their cold eyes seemed to penetrate the boundary and saw the crowd. Qi Su, Qi Wen, Qi Yu, Qi Sha, 4 old acquaintances. At a glance, Yun Nuoxing saw the few people at the front of the crowd. Immediately, his face darkened as he sneered. Only the people from the Qi family came. There are no other forces. Jin Jinwang frowned and said in a deep voice. Do we have to evacuate? Yun Nuoxing asked. Not for now. The 9 deities' palace is not to be bullied. If there is a problem, we will bring you back to the deities' palace. I want to see who dares to behave atrociously. Jin Jinwang said in a deep voice, and a sharp glint flashed in his golden eyes. It's been a long time since I fought. It's not a bad choice to stretch my bones with my true strength. Lei Tian clenched his fists and sneered. It's a little strange. The battle for the spiritual godly physique seems to be too early. It shouldn't be so early. The previous battles only started when the spiritual godly physique stepped into the initial deity level. The Qi family seems to be in a hurry. The beautiful woman frowned, not understanding the meaning of the Qi family's actions. Little Star has too many divine weapons in his hands. He hasn't reached the level of the previous divine physiques, but his essence is almost there. Now, he can almost sweep away all the gods at the divine underworld level. The Qi family can't sit still. This matter is just adding fuel to the fire. Even without the matter of the divine glaze Earth Palace, it will only be delayed a little. Moreover, the Qi family's main purpose is probably to stir up the situation and make the world move. Jin Jinwang frowned and said, All right. In short, the Qi family is asking for a beating. I haven't demolished a city in a long time. Yun Nuoxing nodded and took out the Nethervoid sword and Ling Hongjian, which made everyone speechless. Every time he fought, he would tear down a city. First, it was the Divine Weapon City, then the Underworld Flame City, and then the Divine Sky City. He was given the title of City Demolisher by the world. If he fought this time, there was an 80% chance that Lihuan City would be destroyed as well. You don't have to fight. Just wait at the side. If there's anything wrong. Jin Jinwang shook his head. Before he could finish his sentence, Yun Nuoxing snatched it away. Then I'll play the zither directly and let them hear what the true roar of 10,000 daos is. Yun Nuoxing spread out his hands indifferently. Everyone was speechless. They recalled that outside the Tana's water god palace, when the silver-blue zither was played, the illusion of the Taotai directly died. They trembled in fear. It's a waste of talent. The beautiful woman knocked him on the head and said, If there's something wrong, you guys should leave first. I'm afraid that someone will take the risk out of desperation. We're fine, they're very unyielding, but they won't dare to casually touch our 9 divine halls. We're an iron plate, their temporary wooden bucket isn't that hard. Moreover, if something happens, the 9 hall masters will also come out. All right, then I'll watch from the side. Yun Nuoxing pouted and nodded sullenly. Brother. Little Purple Soul tugged Yun Nuoxing's arm worriedly, and called out softly. Although she was still young and didn't know what was going on, she could feel that the atmosphere was not right. It's okay. Brother will protect you. Yun Nuoxing patted her head lovingly and smiled. Qi Yu is so troublesome. Let me give him a hand. Yun Nuoxing frowned and looked at Qi Yu. She then looked at Jin Jinwang and the others worriedly. Qi Yu was an emperor of the netherworld. He was one level higher than the divine kings. Even if they worked together, they couldn't resist him. The gap of one level was too big. The divine kings frowned. Apparently, they also thought of this problem. They didn't want Yun Nuoxing to take action because the situation would be too complicated in a chaotic battle. Although they knew that this guy had a lot of trump cards, they were afraid that he didn't have enough battle experience. It would be fun if he was tricked. No matter how strong he was just an immortal grade cultivator. That's not appropriate. The Gold God King shook his head and refused. Hey. What's wrong with your eyes? Other than me, who can kill that old man? Yun Nuoxing put her hands on her waist and said, Don't worry. The moment the enchantment is broken, I'll kill him with the light element. It's okay. Qi Yu has already suffered once. I'm just afraid that he has some countermeasures to guard against your extreme speed. Jin Jinwang shook his head and said, Then, do you have any plans? Yun Nuoxing sighed and looked at Jin Jinwang. No. Jin Jinwang was startled, but admitted it honestly. That's right. There's no other way. As for what kind of problems will arise, we'll talk about it when the problem arises. Yun Nuoxing spread out his hands, and as soon as he finished speaking, light essence surged all over his body. Even half of his light purple hair turned into a dazzling golden color. One of his pupils also turned into a dazzling golden color, making him look very bewitching. Everyone was shocked. They knew that this was the result of her pushing the light element to the extreme. They had already seen it once. The light element enveloped his entire body, and a terrifying aura surged out of the netherworld ruin sword. Its overwhelming battle intent was tinged with a hint of excitement, which shocked everyone. This sword already had its own emotions, and combined with the words it had spoken last time, they immediately had some guesses about what was going on. Could it be the most mysterious and terrifying sword on the divine weapon ranking, divine sword record? It was born for destruction, has its own soul, and is said to be a different kind of life form. The netherworld sword? Jin Jinwang murmured. Then, he suddenly raised his head and stared at Yun Nuoxing with a burning gaze. His soft words made everyone swallow their saliva. Yun Nuoxing casually nodded his head, causing everyone to suck in a breath of cold air. Motherf *Ker. He had 2 divine swords in his hands, and they were the first 2. Even if a god came, he would be able to kill them, I thought you knew? Yun Nuoxing looked at everyone innocently and muttered. Everyone rolled their eyes. Chapter 361. Actually, I wanted to see what it would be like to unsheath the netherworld ruin sword. Unfortunately, she wouldn't let me unsheath it. Yun Nuoxing sighed and tightened her grip on the netherworld ruin sword. She wouldn't unsheath it? Everyone was stunned and looked at Jin Jinwang. The latter was also stunned when he saw dozens of pairs of eyes staring at him. He waved his hand and said, I don't know either. Are they waiting outside for us to come out? Yun Nuoxing looked at Qi Yu and the others in shock. They were just standing in the sky and did not move after shouting a sentence. It seemed like they were not in a hurry to start fighting. They just stood there quietly and stared at the manor in the sky with thousands of pairs of eyes. They would be crazy if they dared to force us. Jin Jinwang rolled his eyes. The Qi family did not want to force Jin Jinwang and the others to do so. If they angered the 9 divine halls, they would have to bear the consequences no matter how powerful they were. Wait. Don't be in a hurry. I feel a little strange. Jin Jinwang waved his hand and said to Yun Nuoxing. Yun Nuoxing blinked and looked at him. She then looked at the sky with her evil spirit eyes. After a while, she did not see anything different. Although she was a little confused, she still trusted Jin Jinwang and the others. She hesitated and suppressed the light element and put away the netherworld ruin sword and Linghong sword. Jin Jinwang nodded at the water god king when he saw this. The latter's hand seals changed and the boundary around the manor trembled and slowly disappeared. As the boundary disappeared, the sky darkened and the frost that covered the sky and the earth appeared in front of everyone at a close distance. Chi-Yu smiled coldly in the sky as he looked at the boundary that was gradually disappearing. His gaze pierced through space and looked at the black figure in the manor. His cold voice, which was filled with bone-chilling coldness, resounded in the sky. "Spirit receiving godly body, let's see where you can run to this time." Hearing Chi-Yu's creepy laughter, Yun Nuoxing rolled her eyes and elbowed Jin Jinwang, which meant, "You said it was a little strange." "What is strange? Hurry up and do it." Jin Jinwang rolled his eyes and his figure slowly floated out. Looking at the huge formation, he was afraid that many forces were already paying attention to this place. According to his guess, the Qi family should have already stirred up the situation. Could it be that they were really going to fight? "Old dog, your nonsense is still so pleasant to listen to. Have you ever thought of changing your voice? I want more people to listen to you." Yun Nuoxing sat on the chair with one hand supporting her chin and her elbow resting on the stone table as she asked with a faint smile. "Your teeth are still so hard. I want to see if you can still talk so freely after I pull out all your teeth," Chi-Yu said coldly. Hearing this, Chi-Yu's face darkened and he said coldly. The gloominess in his eyes had already reached its peak. However, in the next moment, his eyes were like ice that had melted. He looked at Jin Jinwang indifferently and said, "Jin Jinwang, are you indiscriminately protecting an evil spirit who kills people like flies? This time, many young talents of the forces have died. It is a loss for the entire divine prefecture. I think that the wise 9 divine temple will make the right choice." "Don't flatter me." Jin Jinwang rolled his eyes and crossed his arms. He twisted his neck and said, "I have already explained clearly enough. Little Nuoxing came out with us. We are the first group to walk out of the underground palace. What happened later was definitely not done by him. Could you please explain why someone sensed the fluctuation of the origin of the divine body?" Chi-Yu smiled faintly and said unhurriedly, "TSK, I haven't even fought with the younger generation. How would they know what my origin power looks like? Isn't it just golden light? Could it be that all of those people were spiritual godly bodies? How could it be that all of them were spiritual godly bodies? Then you might as well look for them. They're definitely softer than me, so you don't have to break your teeth." Yun Nuoxing sneered. Everyone blushed with shame. "Weren't you implying that if you bit him, you would break his teeth? That is indeed the origin energy of the spiritual divine body. I am within it and can clearly sense it." Chi-Wen took a step forward and said indifferently. Yun Nuoxing raised her eyebrows and said with a smile, "Oh, then why were you unable to stop that evil spirit from committing such a crime when you were inside? Could it be that you were condoning such behavior?" Chi-Yu said, "All the major forces have discussed it. This trip is for the young people to come out and gain experience. We can only protect them in secret and can't do anything." "Even if something like this happened?" Yun Nuoxing didn't believe it. "Even if Hao Yu dies in the battle, we won't intervene," Chi-Yu said indifferently. His voice was not loud, but it spread throughout the city, silencing everyone. Yun Nuoxing was stunned. She couldn't find any fault with Chi-Yu's words. The inherited forces valued the cultivation of talents the most. The son of God of each force was the most outstanding immortal seedling. They were very precious. If one was broken, there might not be another one. However, Chi-Yu had the courage to say such words. Chi-Yu took a step forward and said sternly, "Since we have discussed it, we won't intervene. It is the glory of the Qi family's men if they die in the battle." "TSK, so you're allowed to attack me?" Yun Nuoxing rolled her eyes and sneered. "Qi Hao Yu is a human. Am I not a human? You're not allowed to attack them, but you're allowed to attack me by default? You're too murderous. You've devoured the origin of heroes too many times." Chi-Yu said coldly, "Bah! I'm murderous. I devour the origin. Have you ever felt a strong murderous aura from me? Or the aura of other origins? Yun Nuoxing gritted her teeth and tried hard not to go berserk. The spiritual divine body devours the energy of all things and merges it into its own. Naturally, it won't sense the aura of other origins, Qiyu said. Yun Nuoxing was speechless. Indeed, all the energy devoured by the spiritual divine body would be absorbed into its own body and refined. Just like the power of the stars that it once absorbed, it would replace the original divine qi and become a purer energy. Although it had never tried to devour other people's origins, theoretically, it might really be absorbed into its own energy instead of manifesting other people's aura. What? You don't want to talk anymore? If you obediently bind your hands and feet and follow me back to the Qi family, maybe the Master will be merciful and spare your life, Qiyu said with a faint smile when he saw that Yun Nuoxing had stopped talking. However, his words made everyone frown. I'm afraid I won't be able to survive if I go back to the Qi family, Yun Nuoxing clenched her fists and said lightly. Then, I'll have to kill you here. Qiyu smiled faintly and nodded. Murderous intent surged in his eyes, and an extremely terrifying aura slowly emerged, causing the surrounding space to tremble. Wait, let's go back to the topic. Mr. Qi Wen just said that he sensed the origin of the spiritual divine body in the underground palace, right? Are you telling the truth? Everyone knows that I have a grudge against the Qi family. How do you know if this is a trap set by you to take revenge on me? Yun Nuoxing took a deep breath and said, Moreover, there's no proof. You keep talking about the golden light, but you didn't see anything. Who knows if you've been talking nonsense for a long time? Hey, you're suspecting me. Qi Wen smiled faintly and didn't explain much. He took out a memory crystal and threw it into the sky. The image that was projected was seen by everyone. In the image, a figure was wrapped in black fog. 2 long swords were wantonly harvesting lives. Every 10 steps he took, he killed someone and swallowed all the corpses. In the black fog, a faint purple light could be seen. Then, a golden light bloomed. More than a dozen weapons shot out from the black fog. Like lightning, they nailed those who were about to jump into the space tunnel to the ground. A silver-blue sword light that was almost 100 feet long covered the image. That sword light is a bit like Ling Hongjian's, but it's not so slow. Yun Nuoxing muttered softly. Ling Hongjian's sword aura could not be seen at all. It was faster than the speed of light. Thinking of this, he sighed. Anyway, this matter had nothing to do with him. What was the point of arguing for so long? If the Qi family wanted to make a move, they could just list out the charges. Is it really done by the spiritual divine body? Those methods of dealing with the enemy are very similar. Ling Hongjian's sword light and so many divine weapons. That faint purple light, is it really him? At first, I thought it was just a rumor. I didn't expect it. Is this person really so vicious? He should be punished by everyone in the world. After the image ended, there were many discussions in Lihuan City. At first, many people were still doubtful, but now many people believed it. This made Yun Nuoxing's reputation even worse. Sigh. Yun Nuoxing sighed heavily. His handsome face showed some fatigue. He looked at Qiyu and murmured softly, What is the Qi family trying to do? Can't they just give me a quick death? I'm really tired. Why do they have to find trouble with me? I didn't do anything. Yuan Qian sighed and walked forward. She touched Yun Nuoxing's head and said, Little boy, an innocent man gets into trouble because of his wealth. The Qi family is just a reflection of this sentence. The spiritual divine body is as bloodthirsty as a demon. It is the enemy of everyone in the world. All the practitioners in the world can suppress it. For the future of all the practitioners in the world, the Qi family is willing to be the pioneer. Qiyu smiled faintly and said slowly, If you want a quick death, no problem. Just stretch out your neck and accept it. Ha! For the future of the whole world. Yun Nuoxing was so angry that he laughed. He suddenly stood up, gritted his teeth, and squeezed out the words from between his teeth. Then what reason do you have that I won't kill you for my future? The oppressive voice reverberated throughout the entire Lihuan city, causing the discussions to stop. This sentence was actually not wrong. Everyone had the right to choose their own future. There was no need to say that they had to die for anyone. The truth is right in front of you. Don't talk too much. Chiyu smiled faintly and still looked calm. However, before he could finish, he was interrupted by Yun Nuoshing. The truth is the truth. Truth, my ass. How can you talk about a fabricated truth? If that's the truth, I'll just destroy it and nothing will happen. Yun Nuoshing finally couldn't take it anymore and roared furiously. Boom! As soon as Yun Nuoshing finished speaking, his figure appeared in the sky. Surging golden energy swept out, and at the same time, a light purple sea of fire surged out. Dozens of sacred weapons floated around him. The Nether Void sword emitted a bright purple-black light, and the Linghong sword in his left hand also buzzed softly. Before the two swords and all the sacred weapons moved, a great pressure fell on everyone's heads and enveloped the entire city. At this moment, everyone couldn't help but tremble. Jin Jinwang, Chiyu, and the rest widened their eyes in shock. This was because they felt that they had lost connection with the power of space at this moment. Linghong's sword. Chapter 362. The instant they lost their connection with the power of space, everyone's hearts were filled with shock. Powerhouses above the god level could control and use the power of space. The reason why gods above this level were powerful was that, aside from their immense strength, they could also use the power of space to attack or defend. But now they had lost their connection with the power of space, which was no different from being crippled by half. When everyone lost contact with the power of space, rings of silver-blue light flowed around Ling Hongjian, gushing out from the void and flowing into Ling Hongjian. This rich energy was the power of space. The power of space in the sky was all under Ling Hongjian's control. Ling Hongjian, also known as the Sword of Spacetime, could not use the power of space and time directly, but could be used to suppress or control them. For example, Chiyu, Jin Jinwang and the others could not use the power of space in front of Ling Hongjian. You said that I am a demon, then I will become a demon. Yun Nuoshing murmured softly. Then she looked up and stared at Chiyu sharply. She said flatly, "But remember, one day, you will pay the price for every word you say." Nuoshing, don't be rash. Jin Jinwang frowned. In a flash, he came to Yun Nuoshing's side. He resisted the pressure of the two divine weapons and pulled her behind him. He squinted his golden eyes and stared at Chiyu. He said in a deep voice, "Chiyu, you are a famous expert. How can you force a junior?" Junior? Chiyu burst out laughing when he heard that. He held his stomach and sneered. Jin Jinwang, don't tell me you still think he is a junior. Even if you go against him, I am afraid you will not be able to survive, right? The Golden Divine King rolled his eyes. Chiyu was right. As long as he had the Netherworld Ruins sword in his hand, anyone below the level of the Emperor of the Underworld would be killed with a single slash. Moreover, he had two genuine eternal divine weapons. If he didn't take out his own eternal divine weapons, who could resist him? Even if a god emperor came, he wouldn't dare to pat his chest and face him alone, right? If people don't offend me, I won't offend them. Since you want to find trouble with me, I can only give you a sword strike. Yun Nuoshing frowned and took 2 steps forward. The condensed light elements overflowed slightly, and she was ready to rush forward to kill Chiyu. However, she was stopped by Jin Jinwang. Why are you so impulsive? Jin Jinwang grabbed Yun Nuoshing's arm and pulled her back. He rolled his eyes and said helplessly, "Didn't we say that we would take care of this for you? Celestial King, they're already bullying us. How can I not be impulsive?" Yun Nuoshing pouted and pouted, causing Jin Jinwang to lose his temper. Although Yun Nuoshing liked peace and quiet, He couldn't stand being troubled by others all the time. According to his philosophy, if others didn't offend him, he wouldn't offend them. If others offended him, he would avoid them. If others offended him again, he would directly fight them. He was a person who couldn't stand being wronged. At this point, he had no choice but to do it. He was sick of this kind of disturbance and really wanted to slap the Chi family to death. The Chi family had always been causing trouble for him. From Divine Weapon City until now, it was all because of the Chi family. Moreover, they were insatiable and unforgiving. Even a saint would explode from anger. I know that you feel wronged. I know that you can't wait for the Chi family to disappear from the realm of the gods. However, you don't have that kind of strength now. Just bear with it for a while. When the spiritual divine body reaches the large success stage, no one will stop you even if you turn the realm of the gods upside down. Jin Jinwang sighed and said, I can't stand it anymore. I want to kill. Yun Nuoshing gritted his teeth and said hatefully. The netherworld ruin's sword in his hand became brighter and brighter. It even made people want to destroy it. Everyone was shocked. They quickly suppressed their state of mind and then took a few steps back. What kind of sword is that? It can actually affect my state of mind. Chi Su's face was a little surprised when he felt the churning desire. He hurriedly took a few steps back and took a few deep breaths to calm the inexplicable desire in his heart. He looked at Chi-Wan and asked, I don't know. I've never seen it before. It was rare that Chi-Wan, who saw through Yun Nuoshing and Xian's constitution, actually shook his head and said in a deep voice, It should be a divine sword from the divine sword record. I just don't know which one it is. Even if you can't bear it, you have to bear with it. Jin Jinwang sighed and said, If a fight really broke out today, that would be what the Chi family wants to see. You were impulsive. Doesn't that prove that you are in the wrong? I am in the wrong, The corner of Yun Nuoshing's eyes twitched. He just opened his mouth and couldn't continue. He calmed down and thought about it. His heart trembled. He still couldn't completely prove that he wasn't the evil spirit. If he was impulsive, he would fall into the Chi family's trap. Even if he wasn't the evil spirit, they could still make up a story. They could even make a dead person come alive. When that time came, he wouldn't be able to defend himself. Thinking of this, Yun Nuoshing took a deep breath. His twitching face slowly calmed down. He put away all the divine weapons behind him, leaving only the Nethervoid sword and Ling Hong's sword in his hands. However, the murderous intent in his eyes didn't decrease. Instead, it increased. Although he was easily angered, he could still control it quickly. Chi-Yu saw that Yun Nuoshing calmed down instantly. His eyebrows twitched. After a while, he sneered and looked at Jin Jinwang, who was beside Yun Nuoshing, and said, The 9 divine temples are protecting the Naling divine body? Jin Jinwang nodded. Yun Nuoshing was the person that the 9 divine temples higher-ups had been looking for. It was the decision of the 9 divine temples to protect him. It represented the will of the 9 divine temples. Even if the 9 divine temples collapsed, they had to protect Yun Nuoshing. Don't tell me that you really believe that the 8 of you can deal with us? Since the Light Yuan King is not here, no one can stop me. Chi-Yu sneered. On their side, they had him, the Emperor of the Netherworld, and 3 kings of the Netherworld. There were many divine emperors and Shinming experts in the army behind them. On the other hand, Jin Jinwang and the other 7 were only kings of the Netherworld. If the Light Yuan King was not here, no one could stop Chi-Yu. As if to prove Chi-Yu's words, Chi-Su and the other 2 behind him sneered. Their powerful auras surged to the sky. When they combined, their auras were terrifying. Humph! Seeing the 3 of them step out, Jin Jinwang sneered and stepped out as well. The 7 of them also appeared in front of Yun Nuoshing. Their powerful auras surged out and resisted the auras coming from the other side. An early-stage Netherworld Emperor can withstand it. Yun Nuoshing looked at Chi-Yu in surprise. You can come and try. Yun Nuoshing smiled and pointed the Netherworld Ruins sword at Chiyu. Although he could not stop Chiyu, he could kill him instantly. The outcome would be decided in an instant. Chiyu's face twitched. When he saw the Netherworld Ruins sword, his right hand twitched in pain. The scene and the sword seemed to have happened yesterday. The sound of the blade cutting flesh still lingered in his ears. Although his broken arm was reattached, the aura of the divine weapon had eroded his body. It took him half a year to recover. So what if you are the Emperor of the Netherworld? I can defeat you with a sword. Yun Nuoshing sneered. With a thought, dozens of divine weapons appeared behind him and floated in front of the kings of the Netherworld. With him as a mobile arsenal, the dozens of divine weapons could smash Chi-Yu half to death under the power of the kings of the Netherworld. The faces of Chi-Yu and the other three twitched. What the hell was this? If an expert of the late Netherworld King realm had dozens of high-level divine weapons, even a beginner Netherworld Emperor like him would have to retreat. My friend Chi-Yu, let me give you a hand. Just when the atmosphere was tense, a clear laughter rolled in from the sky like thunder. Then, a few figures flew over like lightning. In a few blinks of an eye, they appeared in the sky. Their aura was as vast as the ocean, and it directly suppressed the aura of Jin Jinwang and the others. Looking at the figures in the sky, Jin Jinwang's face darkened immediately. The Emperor of the Netherworld is at least of the middle Netherworld stage. Feeling the unusually powerful aura, the beautiful woman's face darkened immediately. It would be difficult to deal with two emperors of the Netherworld. Even if they had the help of divine weapons, it would be difficult to suppress them. Above the sky, a green figure stood in the air. On his robe, there was a lifelike green dragon that seemed to be rolling up and down. He looked to be in his 20s. He had a handsome and harmless face. He grinned and looked at the crowd. Then, he led a few people behind him to Chi-Yu's side. A faint dragon's might spread out from him, and it made the legs of the people in the city tremble. The Supreme Elder of the Qinghai Palace. Even such a figure is here. Isn't he in seclusion all year round? Qing Xian also suffered serious injuries in the underground palace. He is here to seek an explanation. As soon as this person appeared, a series of gasps could be heard in the city. Was this year's battle for the divine body of spiritual reception really about to begin? Even such a big shot had appeared. Compared to the gloomy faces of Jin Jinwang and the others, Chi-Yu revealed a smile on his face. He glanced at Jin Jinwang and felt a little relieved. He cupped his hands at the young man in green and said, "Haha, so it's Elder Qing Miao. I didn't expect you to come out this time. If you can help me to capture the divine body, the Qi family will reward you handsomely." "Haha, Elder Qi, you don't have to say too much. I am only here to seek justice for Qing Xian. As for the rest, it's up to you. It's a pity that he is still lying in bed." The young man called Qing Miao also cupped his hands at Chi-Yu and smiled. Come. It would be best if all the 12 constellation palaces or forces that are hostile to me are here. Then, I won't have to waste my meticulous preparation." Seeing Qing Miao coming over, Yun Nuoshing did not panic. She placed her palm on her chest and smiled faintly. She spoke in an extremely soft voice. "Why do I feel that you are looking forward to it?" The divine kings rolled their eyes at her. Was she pretending to be relaxed because she knew that the situation was tense? Or was she really confident that she could kill the emperors of the underworld? Gods were not that easy to kill. Even if Yun Nuoshing had the ultimate speed and attack, the sword of Netherworld, it would still be difficult for her to kill two emperors of the underworld. Seeing Yun Nuoshing still staring at her with a relaxed expression, Qing Miao's old eyes lit up. She raised her eyebrows and smiled. "You are the divine body? I have a name. Don't call me by my divine body. However, vulgar people like you are only fit to call me by my codename." Yun Nuoshing played with her long hair and smiled faintly. She took a step forward. "Haha, you are indeed a young hero." Seeing Yun Nuoshing's indifferent expression, Qing Miao was stunned. She smiled and said, I am not interested in you. I am only here to seek justice for Qing Xian. As for how to deal with you, that is the Qi clan's matter. Hearing Qing Miao's words, Yun Nuoxing rolled her eyes and said, You emperors of the underworld should know very well whether I was the one who caused the massacre that day. At this moment, you are still using the name of righteousness. Aren't you being too hypocritical? Haha, the young hero is so bold. However, you people are not enough to be your backing. Qing Miao did not mind and smiled. Her gaze swept across Jin Jinwang and the others as she said, If they are not enough, will it be enough with the two of us? A lovely bell-like laughter gently reverberated across the sky after Qing Miao's words sounded. After which, a spatial crack line was opened on both the left and right of the Yun Nua planet. The crack lines rippled slightly in front of the many pairs of eyes that did not blink. After which, a delicate and alluring figure appeared from the distorted space on the right. She lifted her leg and slowly stepped out of the space. She appeared under the sunlight in this world. Even the frost aura around her had slightly scattered. The slender golden-clothed girl gently landed on Yun Nuoxing's right under the silent sky. Her golden robes swayed gently and her long golden hair was casually scattered behind her. Her thin feather clothes covered her slender arms and waist. 2 small jade beads hung from her earlobes, making clear jingling sounds as they swayed with the wind. Her robes were not luxurious, but they carried an aura that was above the heavens and the earth, causing the heavens and the earth to pale in comparison. Her elegant and exquisite face lifted slightly and looked at Qi Yu before looking at Yun Nuoxing. She displayed a smile that made one's heart palpitate. On the left side of Yun Nuoxing, a skinny silver-blue figure appeared quietly. The young man's handsome face looked a little indifferent, and his silver-blue eyes looked a little empty. In his robe, there were electric dragons flying around. His grayish-white hair was draped over his shoulders, and his slightly pointed chin was slightly raised, with a little tiredness and arrogance. With just a casual glance, it seemed to make people hear the rumbling of thunder. The thunder elements in the sky quietly increased. The empty eyes glanced at Qi Yu and Yun Nuoxing casually, and then turned to Yun Nuoxing. Only then did the lifeless eyes lit up a little. However, it was this beautiful and slender figure that made Jin Jinwang and Lei Tian's jaws drop to the sky. 2 voices that shook the entire city uncontrollably burst out. Big, 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 great elder. Chapter 363. In the sky, 2 young figures were floating in the air. One of them was looking at Yun Nuoxing with a smile, while the other was looking at him with interest. Judging from their youthful faces, it was impossible to tell that they were people who had lived for a long time. Yun Nuoxing's handsome face turned red as he was stared at by 4 pairs of eyes. He couldn't help but shrink his neck and turn around silently. He wanted to step back quietly, but he was caught by the golden girl. He was stunned and quickly turned his head, only to see a jade-like hand enlarging in front of his eyes. Ear. The girl reached out her hand and pinched Yun Nuoxing's ear. Then, she patted his head, elongating his cheeks and shrinking them back. After a while, she laughed coquettishly, making him feel awkward and quickly lowered his head. The great elder is here. The moment Jining saw the girl, she quickly shrank her head and hid behind Xian. Even Jin Jinwang felt a little unnatural. He pulled the water god king in front of him and restrained his aura and light, as if he didn't exist. Everyone was speechless. Lei Ming, on the other hand, was very calm. He calmly walked behind Yao Hua and curled up into a ball, looking at the wall of the manor indifferently. Lei Tian's action was similar to his. He hid behind Huozhu and remained silent. The thunder in his body was like a mouse that saw a cat, shrinking in his body and not coming out. Compared to the 4 of them, the world had become abnormally quiet. The people below did not even dare to breathe loudly. Chi Yu and Qing Miao's faces darkened as they silently took a step back. The smile on Qing Miao's face gradually turned solemn. Everyone was so scared that they didn't dare to breathe loudly. The great elders of the 9 deities temple hadn't appeared for many years. Countless years ago, they had already made a name for themselves and retired from the temple. They didn't expect that they would appear today for the sake of Yun Nuoxing. If this news spread out, it would definitely shock many people with evil intentions. After all, at this point, everyone knew that the 9 deities temple was risking their lives to protect Yun Nuoxing. If they continued to cause trouble, they might even drag out the 9 legendary figures. That would be King fun. Little brother, what's your name? The girl stretched out her slender finger and lifted Yun Nuoxing's chin. She asked with a smile, causing the divine king's faces to darken. How could the 9 divine palace not know Yun Nuoxing's name? She was clearly trying to flirt with Yun Nuoxing. Great elder, how old are you already? Why are you still flirting with little fresh meat? The gold god king hid behind the water god king and muttered in an almost inaudible voice. In the end, he felt an indescribable chill and suddenly shivered. He quickly raised his head and, as expected, he saw the girl staring at him with a smile, which made his face turn pale. Yun Nuoxing's face was covered in cold sweat. She turned her head stiffly. In the spiritual world, Ziyi was knocking on the bed and laughing maniacally, making him feel very awkward. Nose. The girl pinched Yun Nuoxing's nose again. She didn't take Chi Yu and the others seriously at all. It was as if they were here to have fun and not to fight. Yun Nuoxing's face was bitter. She looked at Jin Jinwang for help. However, the latter gave her a look that said, "Good luck." Then, he shrank his head back. Yun Nuoxing was speechless. That, sister, you. Yun Nuoxing shivered and laughed dryly. Little brother, you are so sweet. I like it. The girl was inexplicably happy when she heard that. She caressed Yun Nuoxing's face with her delicate hand and licked her red lips with her tongue. Then, she leaned close to Yun Nuoxing's ear and exhaled. Yun Nuoxing's body trembled, and she was about to cry. She was even more flirting than Yuan. Everyone below was speechless. First elder. He is still a child. It is said that his only regret is that he didn't have a good relationship when he was young. But don't worry, he won't do anything to little Star. Jining also smiled bitterly. She didn't dare to be angry with the first elder, so she could only explain in embarrassment. Everyone rolled their eyes in unison. The image of the legendary Great Elder in their hearts had completely collapsed in an instant. When she saw that Yun Nuoxing's handsome face was so red that it was about to bleed, the girl was satisfied and let go of him. Then, she patted his head and looked at Chi Yu and the others, whose faces were dark. She smiled sweetly and said, "I heard that someone was looking for trouble with our little divine child, so I came out to see who had such courage. I didn't expect it to be little Yu. This sounded very intimate, but it made Chi Yu tremble. His hands trembled slightly. He knew that the arrival of these 2 people today had completely ruined their additional mission. However, the main mission was as the Golden God King had expected. They had achieved their goal. Yun Nuoxing rolled his eyes. Since when did he become someone else's thing? Also, little way beside you, aren't you going to come out and greet your servants? The girl pursed her lips and smiled. She looked to the side and said. As soon as the girl finished speaking, the space in front of Chi Yu quickly split open, and a white figure quickly walked out. As soon as the figure appeared, the cold air behind him completely dissipated within a few breaths' time. The white figure frowned and took a deep breath. He bowed slightly and cupped his fist. He said softly, "Greetings, Princess Jean." Seeing the white figure, Yun Nuoxing gasped. He didn't expect the Qi family to have a backup plan. This time, they really came prepared. Even if he could kill Chi Yu quickly, he would be killed by this person in the dark. How long has it been since we last met? Where is Prince Qi? Did he not come out? The girl called Princess Jean said with a smile as she played with a strand of her blonde hair. Great Elder, he's in closed-door training. The white figure swallowed a mouthful of saliva, his body involuntarily trembling. If not for Yun Nuoshing opening his evil spirit eye, it would be hard to see him trembling, because the trembling was too small. Seeing this person's appearance, Yun Nuoshing was slightly surprised. He looked at the girl beside him, and then looked at the young man. He faintly felt that there was a wave of energy coming from their bodies, but it seemed that there was no energy at all. However, the white figure seemed to be trying his best to resist something. The conflicting senses made him feel baffled. I want to take the little divine child with me. Do you have any objections? Princess Jean smiled and said, What happened today is just a misunderstanding. Qi Wei's teeth were chattering. He swallowed his saliva and said with difficulty. Seeing him like this, the crowd couldn't help but sigh. Indeed, there was always someone to beat. Qi Yu and his people who were so arrogant just now were now trembling in fear. They couldn't even speak properly, which made the crowd sigh. I hope this is just a misunderstanding. I will talk to Prince Qi one day. Princess Jean nodded. Her casual words made Qi Wei's body tremble. What happened today is the Qi family's fault. Little brother, if we have offended you, please forgive us. I apologize on behalf of Qi Yu and the others. Qi Wei gritted his teeth. Cold sweat kept coming out from his forehead and gathered into a small stream to his chin. He seemed to be under great pressure and it took him a minute to finish his sentence. Yun Nuoshing's face trembled. He rolled his eyes and smiled slightly. He said, Elder Qi, you must be joking. This was a misunderstanding. Fortunately, we didn't really fight. Otherwise, it would have deepened. Since you have said so, I won't continue to pursue this matter. Yun Nuoshing knew very well that Qi Wei was being polite to him because of the girl beside him. The Qi family was also an ancient family. Although it shouldn't be difficult for the 9 divine halls to eradicate them, he had heard from Jin Jinwang that the 9 divine halls would protect him with all their might. However, it didn't mean that they would destroy the Qi family for him. Therefore, it was the best ending to scare the Qi family away today. No one wanted to fight under such circumstances. Although Yun Nuoshing could fight with the Emperor of the Underworld with the help of the God weapon, it didn't mean that he was very powerful. Therefore, this was the best ending. He would fight on his own in the future and not rely on the 9 divine halls. Hearing Yun Nuoshing's words, Qi Wei secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He looked at the Jin princess with a complicated expression and then looked at the netherworld ruins, sword seriously. Although the former wasn't very powerful, the sword could kill gods. No matter how one looked at it, if they really fought, the Qi family would suffer heavy losses, especially after the Jin princess came. Therefore, no matter how unwilling and aggrieved he was, he had to sneak away to avoid being kicked back. If that happened, he would really lose all his face. All of us will withdraw now. Qi Wei forced a smile. He waved his sleeve and the space behind him became distorted. His body also slowly disappeared into the distorted space. Behind him, Qi Yu and a large group of people hurriedly followed. They were afraid that they would be killed by a slap if they were a step slower. Seeing the Qi family leave quickly, the Jin princess smiled and looked at Qing Miao and the others. She said, Where is this little brother? Qing Miao looked at Qi Wei and the others, who were leaving with their heads and faces covered in dirt, and started to panic. When he heard the words of the girl who had scared the Qi family away, his whole body trembled. He could only laugh dryly at the way she addressed him. Although he was very old, he obviously wasn't as powerful as the fairy-like queen in front of him. He could only bite the bullet and say, I just want to ask for an explanation. I have no interest in the little son of the deity hall. That matter, after I investigate it thoroughly, I will give the Qinghai Palace a satisfactory answer. The Jin princess patted Yun Nuoshing's head and smiled sweetly. Our little son of the deity is not such an evil person. Everyone was speechless. Yun Nuoshing was so embarrassed that she wanted to find a hole to hide in. Then I'll have to trouble Your Highness. Qing Miao heaved a sigh of relief and cupped her hands. She was so nervous that she stuttered. Today's matter. I will apologize to the little son of the deity. If the matter is investigated, and it has nothing to do with the little son of the Qinghai Palace, I, Qing Miao, will apologize to you in front of everyone on behalf of the Qinghai Palace. Okay. You can go now. The Jin princess waved her hand casually. Qing Miao nodded like a chicken pecking at rice, as if he had been pardoned. Then, he flew into the sky with his people and hurriedly left. Lihuan City was originally surrounded by an overwhelming army, but in just a few minutes, only Yun Nuoshing and the others were still standing in the sky. At this time, everyone could only say, "What af** king drama." The Qi family and the Qinghai Palace, who had come with invincible power, were scared away by a girl with just a few words. This really made everyone speechless. Are you here for a fashion show? Yun Nuoshing was speechless. From Qi Yu's appearance to the Jin princess's appearance, Qi Wei's departure with his people, and Qing Miao, who had been like an audience, came and left. In the end, damn it, no one made a move. That tense atmosphere was just a background, wasn't it? It was as if they were all here to chat about their daily lives. They all showed their faces and then it was over. However, Yun Nuoshing knew that if the Jin princess and Qi Wei did not come today, a big battle would have been inevitable. However, because of this, everyone who had been watching from the sidelines could only sigh and shake their heads helplessly. Today is just a fashion show day. Chapter 364. In the spacious hall, the bright sunlight shone through the window and fell on the man in golden robes, making him look even more dazzling, like a holy light. The King of Gods is kneeling. He looks so wrong. He looks like a child who has done something wrong. Everything has its vanquisher. He usually scolds us like this. I didn't expect the King of Gods to be scolded like this too. Unlucky old Jean. Fortunately, our great elder didn't come. Outside the hall, Yao Hua, Water God King, and the others looked at the situation in the hall through the crack of the door. When they saw Jin Jinwang like this, they felt a little lucky and mourned for him for a while. At this moment, the Gold God King was kneeling on the ground with his head buried in his chest. His handsome face had two suspicious blushes. His golden hair hung down, covering half of his handsome face. Through the other half, one could see that he was like a child who had done something wrong. His face was full of grievance and shame, causing the group of young elites outside the hall to be very surprised. They never thought that there would be a day when their own God King would be taught a lesson like this, causing them to be very surprised. Little Stone, what should I say to you? You didn't even bring the golden bell bottle when you went out. You even volunteered to leave the little divine child to us. In the end, if I didn't come today, I don't know what would have happened to the little divine child. The Golden Crown Princess sat on the sofa in front of Jin Jinwang. Her slender legs were crossed, and her hands were supporting her cheeks. She was lecturing him like an adult scolding a child. Yun Nuoshing sat aside awkwardly. When the Golden Crown Princess was scolding the King of Gods, she pulled Xian and quietly moved his butt to the side. He didn't want to come in, but the Golden Crown Princess dragged him in to listen. On the other side, Lei Tian shrunk his head and didn't dare to make a sound. He looked at the man with a face full of disgust and lowered his head. I was wrong. Jin Jinwang was on the verge of tears. After the incident at the Tana's water shrine, he had put the golden bottle back into the golden shrine. After all, it was impossible for an eternal weapon to be taken out for a walk all the time. He did not expect such a thing to happen in Lihuan City. If not for the arrival of his great elder, he might have been in danger. Although he was prepared to be scolded, He was not prepared to be scolded in front of a group of juniors. This nickname, where would he put his old face in the future? Jin Jinwang's real name was Jin Shi. The elders of the temple found it troublesome to call him by his name, so they just called him Shi too. Only the Empress would add the word little when she called him, which made him suffer unspeakably. Little divine son, what do you plan to do? I'll leave little Shi to you. The Golden Empress smiled sweetly and poked Yun Nuoxing's face, who was unable to move too far away. Yun Nuoxing was stunned. When she came to her senses, she quickly looked at Jin Jinwang, who was still kneeling. She saw the latter looking at her pitifully with tears in his eyes, and could not help but shudder. She laughed dryly and said, "Forget it, it's fine as long as you're fine. Senior Jin Jinwang has helped me a lot along the way. Don't let him kneel." Jin Jinwang heard this and quickly breathed a sigh of relief. Then, he cast a grateful look at Yun Nuoxing, which made the latter smile bitterly. What did it have to do with him? All right, since the little divine son has said so, little Shi, you can get up. The Golden Empress nodded and said, "Oh." Jin Jinwang felt as if he had been pardoned. He quickly stood up, rubbed his sore knees, and laughed bitterly. This time, he had lost all his face. "Well, little divine son, why don't you go to the little divine prefecture to train?" Suddenly, the Golden Empress said something that stunned everyone. Yun Nuoxing was also stunned. She looked at the Golden Empress, who had a serious expression on her face, and said, "What's wrong? Why do you want to go to the little divine prefecture all of a sudden?" The little divine prefecture is located in the middle of the divine prefecture, and also the center of the entire divine realm. There are countless first-rate forces lying dormant in it, and it is very complicated. Some of them are not weaker than first-rate forces like the Qinghai Palace. There are also some strange races that are not seen in other large regions. It is the core area of the divine realm, and it is also the most exciting place in the divine realm. Most of the top experts in the divine realm also come from there. Although the 9 divine temples and the 8 ancient families did not set up their headquarters there, they still send their disciples to the little divine prefecture to train every year. In a place where geniuses gather, even the divine son of a first-rate force would be beaten down to a mortal. However, the most important thing is that the news in the little divine prefecture is very isolated. It is very difficult for news from other large regions to spread there, the Golden Empress said. Isolated? Why? Isn't it the core area? Why is the news so isolated? Yun Nuoxing was stunned and could not help but ask. There are some reasons. You will know when you get there in the future. The Golden Empress smiled and kept him in suspense. She said, "Because the news there is isolated, I want you to go there. There, no one will know who you are, and no one will care about your past. It is equivalent to starting over. There, with strength comes dignity. Moreover, it is said that you want to repair the divine weapon, right?" Yun Nuoxing nodded. The Nethervoid sword and the Ling Hong sword were both broken, and he was determined to repair them. In the little divine prefecture, there are countless strange places of treasure. Moreover, the fragments of the divine weapon will not disappear. There may be many fragments in the little divine prefecture, and it will be easier to repair them there, the Golden Empress said. But Great Elder Yun Nuoxing is still too weak. It is still too early to go there. It is more appropriate to go when he becomes a demigod. Jin Jinwang hurriedly advised. Although there was indeed no one in the little divine prefecture who knew Yun Nuoxing, those who had the strength to go there were not weak. Moreover, there were many very complicated forces there, and if he was not careful, he would be in danger. Moreover, Yun Nuoxing was not scheming at all. That's true. The Golden Empress sighed and nodded. Yun Nuoxing was helpless. He roughly knew why he had to be sent to the little divine prefecture. Now that he had fought with the Qi family to the bitter end, He had inexplicably offended the Qinghai Palace and 5 of the 12 star palaces. Before he could find out who the scapegoat was, there would be a lot of trouble. The 9 Divine Palace could not protect him forever. This time, they had been protected for such a long time, and they would eventually be separated. Although he was holding a divine weapon, to put it bluntly, his strength was still too weak. He would probably be exhausted after using the divine weapon once. Senior, don't worry. I will be careful. I will not go to the little divine prefecture for the time being, as I have other things to do. When I am done, I will jump into the little divine prefecture and experience it. Yun Nuoshing grinned. The Golden Empress sighed helplessly. After a while, she turned her head and looked at Yun Nuoshing for a long time. When she saw his face turn red, she looked away and said helplessly, "Do as you wish. I can't interfere in the affairs of you young people." After saying that, the Golden Empress put her hand on the jade bead under her earlobe. With a flash of light, a round gemstone appeared. It was colorful, and if one counted carefully, there were exactly 9 colors. After rubbing the gemstone for a while, the Golden Empress put it in Yun Nuoshing's hand and said, "Take this. Once you send out a signal, the people of the 9 Divine Palace who see the signal will rush over and help you." Yun Nuoshing smiled bitterly. Jin Jinwang had given him something similar, but he had never used it because he had no use for it at all. If there were any unexpected situations, he could basically escape, although the outcome might be serious injuries. Perhaps he did not want to borrow the strength of others, as he always felt that it would trouble others. Although this was what he thought, Yun Nuoshing still accepted it solemnly. After all, it was a kind gesture from the Golden Empress. "It's been hard on you. You're still so young, but you have to bear so much pressure that you shouldn't have." The Golden Empress sighed and touched Yun Nuoshing's head tenderly. She did not ask him to go back to the Divine Palace with her. After all, she also knew that Yun Nuoshing had his own things to do. Looking at him, he did not look like someone who would quietly stay in one place and slowly cultivate. Moreover, he had to find the broken magical weapons himself. Moreover, the divine body of spiritual reception needed to accommodate countless weapons to forge itself. According to Yun Nuoshing's own specifications, once he absorbed them, he would need weapons that were above the divine level. No matter how powerful the 9 Divine Palace was, they would not be able to afford his consumption. Magical weapons were not cheap things. It was already very impressive for a first-rate force to have more than a dozen of them. Therefore, the road ahead still needed Yun Nuoshing to walk on his own. Although it sounded a little hopeless, this was the only way. The Qi clan is trying to capture the Sword of Spiritual Reception. Although Qi Yu and the others have been forced to retreat this time, they won't give up so easily. There will definitely be a lot of trouble coming to us in the future. Let's be realistic. Even the 9 Divine Palace doesn't want to start a war with one of the 8 families. We all came from the remote antiquity era and each of us has something as our foundation. No one knows what our trump cards are. If we attack them casually, it will cause a lot of casualties. I hope you can understand this, Golden Queen said softly. Senior, don't worry. Nuoshing is not an unreasonable person. You have already helped me a lot. Yun Nuoshing nodded with a smile. The Golden Empress was a little unhappy when she heard Yun Nuoshing calling her senior. She pinched his face and said, "Little star, I still hope that you will call me more sweetly." Yun Nuoshing was stunned for a moment and smiled awkwardly. "Just call me that." The Golden Empress rubbed his face and said with a smile. Jin Jinwang was speechless. He covered his face and turned to the side. He could not watch any more. Yun Nuoshing blushed and only managed to squeeze out the word "senior" after a long time. The Golden Empress was overjoyed. Her smile was like a beautiful rose that bloomed. Everyone outside the door was stunned. How was the talk? Seeing Yun Nuoshing and the Golden Empress come out, everyone quickly surrounded them and asked. Yun Nuoxing looked back at Jin Jinwang and the Golden Empress, who were talking about something. He gently closed the door and looked at everyone. He said helplessly, "Talk about what? What can we talk about? What do you want to talk about?" "We are just curious about what you talked about inside." Everyone laughed awkwardly. Yun Nuoxing rolled his eyes and repeated what he had just said. Little Divine Land, everyone's faces twitched. Almost everyone knew about that place, but it was also difficult to enter. If there were no accidents, with their own strength, they would need to be at least a demigod to be able to take a step in. For other ranks, unless they had some special means, they would not be able to enter. The Yun Nua planet naturally belonged to the latter. They would probably be able to enter with a divine weapon. Yaohua, Mu Ling, the Divine King and the others asked me to tell you. That's what they said. Yun Nuoxing tapped his palms and then pinched his throat. He imitated Jin Jinwang's tone and said, "Ask the 9 brats outside to return to the temple first. Remember to go to the land of the fallen immortals and quickly cultivate to the demigod level. Then, you can bring them to the little divine land to train." No. Hearing the words, "Land of the fallen immortals," the 9 heroes collapsed on the ground. Especially when they heard that they were going to the little divine land, and that Yun Nuoxing was leading the team, they suddenly felt that there was nothing left to live for. Well, good luck. Yun Nuoxing spread out her hands and looked at the 9 people who were wailing pitifully. Chapter 365. The 9 heroes wailed for a long time before they were taken away by the Water God King. When they parted, they couldn't help but feel a little sad. Although it wasn't a life and death parting, each of them took a while to sort out their emotions. "Little star, be careful when you're outside. We'll come out to play with you again when we're free." Mu Ling covered her mouth and laughed. She waved her hand and disappeared behind the spatial crack. "Good luck. Don't be surpassed by me the next time you come out." Yun Nuoxing cheered them on with a smile. "That's really a lot of pressure." The 9 heroes rolled their eyes at him. The cultivation speed of the spiritual godly physique was simply like flying a plane. Wasn't this making things difficult for them? "Little brother, come back to Divine Sky City to play when you're free." Lu Yi patted Yun Nuoxing's shoulder. "Little brother Nuoxing, Jin Heng and Yao Ling both punched him in the chest. Then, they realized that they were speechless. They didn't know what to say with their mouths wide open. "I'll be a guest when I'm free." Yun Nuoxing smiled and nodded. Jin Heng followed Yao Hua and the rest back to the 9 deity palace, while Yao Ling and Chu Yilian took a ride back to Divine Sky City. "Little brother Nuoxing, if you're free, Yilian would like to discuss music with you." Chu Yilian smiled and transmitted her voice before she left. Yun Nuoxing laughed dryly. That time in the Divine Sky City, the rumbling of the 10,000 Tao rhythm was revealed by some big mouth, which made Chu Yilian interested in him. Now, he could only laugh bitterly. "Fairy, please spare me." The Water God King and the rest also left. After all, after such a ruckus, the world knew what the 9 deity palace's position was. If they wanted to touch Yun Nuoxing again, they would have to think twice. Therefore, they estimated that they could spend some time in peace. They also had to go back and torment the 9 heroes. "Little boy, if you're free, come visit the western region. Our Yuan family is there. Big sister will take care of you." Yuan Qian hugged Yun Nuoxing as she laughed and cried at the same time, which made everyone speechless. They could only walk to the side silently, leaving the 2 of them to put on a parting of life and death. Due to the urgent call of the Yuan family's master, they had no choice but to return. After all, they had been separated for a few years. Before the Tana's Water God's palace, they had stayed in Divine Sky City and did not return. Then, they followed Yun Nuoxing to Lihuan City. This time, they had no choice but to return. Her father had been desperately calling for them. If it were not for the fact that the Yuan family was busy, he would have rushed over to catch them. Young miss, let's go back first. The patriarch has gone crazy from wanting to see you. He hasn't had any appetite for food or drink for the past 3 years. A member of the Yuan family crossed the void and passed through countless teleportation portals before arriving at Lihuan City to pass on this message to Yuan Qian. If it wasn't for this message, she would have definitely chosen to follow Yun Nuoxing. Seeing that Yuan Qian was willing to go back obediently, Yuan Qi and the others heaved a sigh of relief. They were afraid that their elder sister would make a fuss endlessly. Mr. Yun, come and play when you're free. Yuan Shui chuckled and waved at Yun Nuoxing. As for Yuan Shi, he still followed Yun Nuoxing on the journey. However, at this time, he was also putting on a parting scene. Yu Xiao was also called back by the Yu family. After such a big thing happened in Lihuan City, everyone related to Yun Nuoxing had been spread by the gossipers. The Yu family also hurriedly called back their goddess. There was competition between the 8 families. If the Qi family did something crazy, the Yu family would suffer a loss. Be good and go back. Your father must be waiting anxiously. When I am free, I will sneak over to the western regions and visit the Yuan family. At that time, just don't drive me out. Yun Nuoxing touched Yuan Qian's head and said softly. Yuan Qian then smiled through her tears and raised her red lips to Yun Nuoxing's lips like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water. After that, with a beautiful turn, she followed Yuan Qi and the others into the spatial passageway. Yun Nuoxing smiled bitterly and saw Xian's strange smile. It was somewhat inexplicable. Those who didn't know would think that she felt lonely because of everyone's parting. Qing Feng nodded at Yun Nuoxing and put her arm around his shoulder before softly saying, "Little brother, when will I find you to go underground? With a strong alliance, going through the world's tombs will be as easy as walking on flat ground." Yun Nuoxing's head was filled with black lines. Previously, he had guessed that Qing Feng started out by digging graves. He didn't expect that she would want to pull him along. He wanted to complain a little, but he had already disappeared into the horizon. On the other side, Yuan Shi secretly wiped his eyes and looked back with every step he took. He reluctantly sent Yu Xiao off. When he saw her leaving with the Yu family, he sighed sadly. Nuoxing, don't be too ruthless. When he walked back to Yun Nuoxing's side, Yuan Shi patted his shoulder and smiled bitterly. Yun Nuoxing's head was filled with question marks. He didn't know what he was going to do, and he didn't want him to be too ruthless. Lan Xen suddenly appeared and hugged Yun Nuoxing's neck from behind with her soft jade arms. She smiled tenderly and said, "Little she is asking Brother Nuoxing not to torture him." Yuan Shi nodded while Yun Nuoxing was puzzled. After everyone had left, the group of 5, Yun Nuoxing, Xian, Yuan Shi, Lan Xen Ming, there was also the little girl that they found back as Zihan. They all stood in the courtyard blankly and looked at each other. Although they felt that the world had suddenly quieted down, they also felt a little lonely. Little Purple Soul directly rushed into Yun Nuoxing's arms and rubbed her little head against his chest. Her cute and innocent appearance diverted everyone's attention and diluted their mood. Seeing that Little Purple Soul had made the first move, Ming pouted her little mouth but couldn't complain. She could only crawl into Yun Nuoxing's windbreaker and tug at his clothes with her little hand. Her little face full of resentment made them not know whether to laugh or cry. Yun Nuoxing shook his head helplessly and put Little Purple Soul on his shoulder. Then, he picked up Ming and rubbed the little girl's head. "Little Star has become a professional nanny," Xian said with a smile and took Little Purple Soul in his arms. It was quite tiring to take care of 2 children alone. Yun Nuoxing smiled bitterly and couldn't help but lament in his heart, "Bear with it, little Ming is already 11 years old. After 2 or 3 more years, she will be a big child and won't need me to carry her anymore. Little sisters will hate their older brothers when they grow up. Chirp." Little Phoenix raised its head on Yun Nuoxing's head and chirped softly. Then, it lay down again. It had grown a little in the past month, but it was still a small ball. Since they're all gone, let's go too. The Golden Crown Princess, Jin Shenhuang, and the others walked out of the great hall and saw the empty courtyard. They walked to Yun Nuoxing's side. The former patted his head and smiled. Say, sister, where are you going? Yun Nuoxing was about to call her senior, but immediately changed his words and asked. I heard that there are some strange movements in Taiyuan territory. We're going to take a look, Princess Jean said with a smile and pinched Yun Nuoxing's face. Taiyuan territory? The news spread too quickly. Yun Nuoxing laughed dryly. Speaking of Taiyuan territory, he was reminded of the past. In his mind, a red, playful and lively figure floated past. His eyes couldn't help but darken a little. But after a moment, he covered it up and no one saw it. We got the news before we came out from the shrine. We're just going to take a look. Princess Jean winked at Mei Mao and said with a smile, We're leaving. Little star, be careful. Amen. Yun Nuoxing nodded. Just as he was about to wave goodbye, he saw that there was no one left. This speed of leaving is too. Yun Nuoxing laughed bitterly. According to his estimation, Princess Jean and the Great Elder of Lightning Divine Hall were at least God Emperors. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to scare Qi Yu and Qi Wei away. But this speed was a little too shocking. They couldn't even see them and they disappeared. The few of them laughed bitterly. They really came and went without a trace. Where are we going next? The few of them weren't in a hurry to leave. They sat down on the stone chairs in the courtyard and asked Xian. That's a problem. Yun Nuoxing scratched his head. He propped his elbows on the stone table and rested his chin on his hands. He looked like he was in deep thought. This made the few of them quiet down. Yun Nuoxing thought for a while and took out the treasure map. He spread it out on the stone table and waved his hand, inviting the few of them to discuss. According to the way we're going, the next stop should be the Eastern Sea's Burning Mountain. On the way, we'll go to these marked places and see if we can keep them. He pointed at a few places and finally stopped at a mountain on the map. It was surrounded by a vast ocean. He said, although we're going, there's no need to rush. No one can subdue the origin of fire anyway. We'll just wander around. After he finished speaking, he looked at Xian, as if he was asking for her opinion. Xian was stunned. She smiled gently, ran her fingers through her hair and said, Little star, we'll follow your arrangements. Yuan Shi nodded. He had come out with them to gain experience. He suddenly thought of something and said, Nuoxing, I remember that you're a blacksmith, right? And a part-time pharmacist, although not an alchemist, Xian added. Yun Nuoxing nodded and looked at Yuan Shi. He asked, What's wrong? Nothing. Isn't there a lot of people gathering in Lihuan City recently? Someone opened a blacksmith's trade fair. It said that you can exchange materials from the 2nd level to the 6th level. Yuan Shi paused and said, I heard from Jin Jinwang and the others that your 2 heaven-grade weapons were damaged. I wanted to mention it to you and see if you're interested in going. Trade fair. Yun Nuoxing repeated in a low voice and tilted his head. The Netherruin sword was still in the 1st level, but the Linghong sword was already in the 2nd level. He didn't have many low-level materials. He had only bought some last time, and most of them were of the earth element. In order to fully repair it, he needed the 5 element. In other words, he had to find materials of the other 4 element. That's good too. Go buy some low-level materials, or you can practice forging on the way. Yun Nuoxing nodded. He could now forge without hiding in the blacksmith's shop. After all, he had the fire and metal element. The dark room was prepared for people who didn't have the fire element. He could now forge weapons at will. The alchemy world and the blacksmith world will hold a competition at a specific time. All the people in the heavenly realm who boast of their skills will participate. Nuoxing, you can control the 5 element. You'll definitely be famous in the alchemy world. Yuan, she smiled. Come on, famous? That'll only make me die faster. Yun Nuoshing spread out his hands. As a spiritual godly body, the best way was to hide from the world, hide from the world, hide from the world, and hide from the world, until the day of great success, the day when the sovereign ruled the world, otherwise it would always be coveted by others. Although it was very boring, but only after enduring for 1,000 years could one be able to see the wonders of the world. Moreover, I'm not interested in fame or whatever. Yun Nuoshing smiled, then flicked his hair and grinned. I just want to be a quiet, handsome man. Narcissist. Xian and the others rolled their eyes at him. Chapter 366. Su Ming, who was the one who forged you? In a dimly lit secret room, Yun Nuoshing sat cross-legged on a stone bed. A purplish-black sword that was longer than a person lay across her legs. A faint fluorescent light shone from within. Yun Nuoshing's expression was calm. She sent her soul into the nethervoid sword and carefully observed the array patterns inside. Outside the thumb-sized core, there was a bright ball of light enveloping it. Vaguely, an extremely powerful soul ripple spread out. This ball of light was the soul of the nethervoid sword. Although it was still incomplete, it already had a considerable amount of energy. Looking at the complex array that seemed to be evolving into a universe, Yun Nuoshing scratched her cheek and couldn't help but ask. I don't know. It's not you, said the nethervoid sword. Nonsense. Even ghosts know that I didn't forge it. Yun Nuoshing rolled her eyes. The nethervoid sword had been forged countless years ago. She hadn't even been born then. I don't have any memories either. My soul is shattered. However, it shouldn't have been forged for a short period of time. The nethervoid sword paused, then said, Why? Nothing. I'm just a little curious. Who made such a complex array? Sighing, Yun Nuoshing shook her head. The complexity of this array could really scare Jin Jinwang to death. After hesitating for a moment, Yun Nuoshing said, Speaking of which, won't you reject me? That forger spent so much effort to forge you. He should cherish you. Moreover, you are the most unique divine sword in the world. How did you end up in my hands? The nethervoid sword was silent. Yun Nuoshing felt a little awkward. She didn't know if she had asked the wrong question. The nethervoid sword trembled and floated to the side. It poked Yun Nuoshing's waist with the body of the sword and said, Don't think too much. I naturally have my reasons for being here. Moreover, my soul is connected to yours. Isn't the first question a little redundant? Yun Nuoshing screamed in surprise from the itch. She jumped up and touched her waist. She pouted and smiled bitterly. All right, it's unnecessary. Sitting back down, Yun Nuoshing sent her soul energy into the nethervoid sword to observe the runes and runes. A long time later, she said, Nethervoid, which of the 5 elements should I repair first? The nethervoid sword. Let's start with fire. The fire element just so happens to complement your purple night flame to increase its destructive power. Right now, it's just a fire attack, so the enhancement isn't that big. The nethervoid sword was speechless. You're the blacksmith, so why are you asking me? I'm just asking for your opinion, Yun Nuoshing muttered. By the way, I don't know how to fix it, Yun Nuoshing muttered again. Huh! The nethervoid sword was stunned. Its body trembled as if it was frightened. Because the nethervoid sword is a proper weapon, but you have your own soul. Sigh, I don't know how to fix it. Yun Nuoshing poked the sword with her 2 index fingers and lowered her head innocently. The nethervoid sword was suddenly scared. It hurriedly said, Then don't fix it first. I reckon that if I can find all the soul fragments, I'll be able to restore it. All right. Yun Nuoshing nodded helplessly. She thought for a moment and asked, If, and I'm saying if, you can find all the soul fragments, will your memories be restored? The nethervoid sword was stunned. After a moment of silence it said, I don't know. Not necessarily. I'm not sure. Actually, the world's understanding is a little wrong. You should say that other than him, no one else knows what the truth is, said the Nethervoid sword. Truth? Yun Nuashing was stunned. What truth? I'm a person, and the Nethervoid sword is like an incarnation of me. The two can be switched. He didn't forge a sword, he created a life. Creating life, giving a soul. How? How is this possible? When Yun Nuashing heard this, he was stunned. Creating life was an ability that only gods could have. However, to bestow a soul and make it a unique life was a taboo. Even a heavenly god might not be able to do it. It's true. You'll know when you've restored my soul. The Nethervoid sword knocked Yun Nuashing's head and said with a smile, I'm very beautiful. How can a sword have a gender? It's not like I haven't seen beautiful women before. Yun Nuashing rolled her eyes and couldn't help but mutter. She even said the last sentence very softly, afraid that she would hear it. I already said that I'm a person. The Nethervoid sword patted her in annoyance. Good, good, good. You're a person, not a sword. Yun Nuashing grabbed her hand and flicked her with a smile. Lihuan City had an extremely good reputation in this region. In addition to the matter of the heavenly god Glaze's inheritance, its reputation had become even stronger. Under the situation where the residual heat had yet to dissipate, someone, or rather, a force, took advantage of this momentum and opened a trade fair. Anyone could enter. Of course, not everyone wanted to go, because this place was filled with a faint smell of iron and an indescribable fragrance. This was a place where blacksmiths liked to come and go. It was their trade fair. Although it was built temporarily, it wasn't a low-level place. This was because the space here was filled with an astonishing fluctuation that made people's hearts palpitate. Because it was built temporarily, it was located on the outskirts of Lihuan City. In the empty area created by Yun Nuashing, a huge spatial wormhole that was hundreds of meters wide was slowly rotating. A strange suction force slowly spread out from it. The wormhole was at the bottom of this sunken basin. In the sky above this basin, there was a line of large words floating in the void. It was very eye-catching. Welcome to all tourists. Signed by the Nightwalker Alliance. Pft. When Yun Nuashing saw the signature, she couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of water. Even Xian couldn't help but touch her small mouth with a look of shock on her face. Yuan Shi, who was standing at the side, was a little confused. I give full marks to this alliance. Yun Nuashing clutched her chest and said with difficulty. Even Ming, who was in her arms, stared at the wormhole speechlessly. The Nightwalker Alliance is a huge relay station jointly built by several forces. It's also a merchant alliance. It's very famous in the entire realm of the god. Its forces are spread all over the place. Because it spends a lot of time in Shankala, where birds don't lay eggs, it has an unusually large amount of resources and has friendly relations with many forces. Yuan Shi explained, then looked at Yun Nuashing and said, I asked you to come to this place because the Nightwalker Alliance has all kinds of rare and precious materials. Although it's not a large-scale hyperspace trade fair, this temporary gathering is still of high quality. Yuan Shi smiled. From time to time, there would be figures with majestic auras flashing down from the basin. They would rush into the wormhole and disappear. Also of high quality. Yun Nuashing's face twitched a few times. This wormhole was already built, and he still said that it was of high quality. This was considered a big deal. Seeing the surprise on the faces of Yun Nuashing and the other three, Yuan Shi smiled, scratched his neck, and said, Let's go in and take a look. Hearing this, Yun Nuashing and the others nodded. The three of them moved and rushed down the basin. In a few flashes, they appeared in front of the wormhole. From time to time, people would come over from the surroundings of the wormhole. They looked at them strangely for a while, then looked at Xian and the two little girls, and finally plunged into the wormhole. Feeling these gazes, Yun Nuashing just glanced at them, then turned away and followed Yuan Shi into the dark wormhole. Xian followed closely beside her. The moment they entered the wormhole, they clearly felt an inexplicable energy sweep across their bodies, causing Yun Nuoxing to suddenly shiver. It was so big that Yuan Shi clearly saw it. "Don't worry, it's just a probe." Yuan Shi patted Yun Nuoxing's shoulder and smiled. Yun Nuoxing nodded. As the energy faded, their vision suddenly turned dark. Then, a faint light bloomed in front of them, accompanied by a loud noise. When the colors changed in their eyes again, the world in front of them had turned into the appearance of a small town. It wasn't too big, and the buildings were basically made of wood. In the sky above the small town, a small sun was sprinkling warm light. Although it was another world, there were still blue skies and white clouds. It was not much different from the outside world. If one had to describe it, the sun was much smaller. After all, it was man-made. A self-created world. This alliance is really generous. Yun Nuoxing looked into the distance, but couldn't see the end of this world. She smacked her lips and couldn't help but comment. The celebration of the Nightwalker Alliance, the trade fair, and so on are all held in a self-created world. Of course, it's not as big as the realm of the gods, but it's more than enough for some activities. Yuan Shi put his hand on his forehead and looked into the distance for a while. He smiled and said, "The people of the Alliance come from several large regions, and there are all kinds of races. There are even high-level gods among them. Their control of the power of space has reached the acme of perfection. They can probably build a vast and boundless space." Yun Nuoxing nodded. To be able to open up a space specifically for activities and trade was already very impressive. That small sun above her head was especially impressive. According to her guess, to be able to reach such a level and use the power of elements to such a degree, it was at least a god on the same level as Jin Jinwang, or even a little higher. On both sides of the street there were some stone platforms and jade tables. On the stone platforms there were some strangely shaped stones. They were multicolored and emitted powerful energy fluctuations. At a glance, one could tell that they weren't simple objects. Behind each of these stone platforms, there was a person sitting cross-legged. These people all had powerful auras. Obviously, they weren't masters to be trifled with. Earth Flame Stone, Grade 6 material. Mountain Shaking Stone, Grade 5 material. Nether Iron, Grade 6 material. A Haelite Mine, Grade 4. Yun Nuoxing's gaze swept across the stone platforms. Even though he had seen divine objects before, his eyes could not help but light up. Xian, who was beside him, was even more so for Mei Mao. As expected, this is what I should come into contact with at this stage. Yun Nuoxing could not help but smile as he softly said in his heart. He did not lack high-level materials, but low-level materials were pitifully few. Therefore, he could not help but have the idea of looting this place. Of course, he quickly killed it in the cradle. The street was not too long, only 1,000 meters. When Yun Nuoxing inadvertently walked to the end, he sighed and helplessly retracted his gaze. Although he was a little surprised that he had encountered something that moved his heart, it was not of much use to him. What he needed now was materials that possessed a single elemental energy, and not a mixture. Turning around somewhat gloomily, Yun Nuoxing was just about to walk towards another street when he suddenly froze. Looking into the distance, he fixed his gaze on a dark yellow figure in the crowd. His eyes met with his dark yellow eyes. The two pairs of eyes looked at each other from afar, and time seemed to have frozen. "Little star?" Xian saw that he had stopped and also stopped, calling out softly. That." Yun Nuoxing retracted his gaze and smiled at her. Then, he looked over again, only to discover that the person had already disappeared. He could not help but frown. From that pair of eyes, he could only see a kind of indifference, an indifference towards all things in the world. It could even be said that it was loathing, a loathing that was even deeper than the great elder of Lightning Divine Hall. There was also a faint killing intent, this person? Yun Nuoshing was puzzled. He did not know him. Chapter 367. After turning a corner, the noise was obviously much louder, and the shouting that was close to roaring filled their ears. Colorful energy filled the entire space, and the astonishing energy fluctuation made Yun Nuoshing's eyes emit green light again, scaring the people around him to the point that they hurriedly shrank to the side. However, when a deafening demonic sound suddenly rang in their ears, Yun Nuoshing staggered and turned his head with a bitter expression. When he saw that the two of them seemed to be arguing about something, he immediately muttered, "It's like a wet market." Most of the shops on this street are run by the Nightwalker Alliance. They sell extremely rare materials. They might come from the core of the earth, from the endless star field, or from some deep mountain. There are basically no defective product. Compared to other streets, the items here are of a higher grade. Of course, the prices are much higher as well. Yuanshi couldn't help but laugh when he saw him like this. Colored glazed divine crystal. Colored glazed divine crystal. I want a colored glazed divine crystal. Yun Nuoshing muttered softly as he walked. The people around him who had sharp ears couldn't help but swallow their saliva when they heard him. They looked at him as if he was crazy, then quietly walked to the side. Nuoshing, there won't be anything like a colored glazed divine crystal here. Yuanshi whispered in his ear helplessly. Although the colored glazed divine crystal was a level 12 divine item that was exclusive to the gods, some high-level blacksmiths could also use it to forge a divine weapon that would shock the world. Therefore, very few people would take out level 12 materials to exchange at this blacksmith's trade fair. If there were, they would keep them for future use. I'm just muttering. Yun Nuoshing shrugged. Of course, he knew that it was impossible. He just wanted to try his luck and see if anyone had misjudged it. However, those who could come here were more or less extraordinary. It was impossible for them to let go of such a big loophole. You guys walk around first. I'll go find someone. Yuanshi suddenly patted Yun Nuoshing's shoulder and said with a smile. Then, he turned around and walked into an alley. Yun Nuoshing nodded. With a slight movement of her hand, the golden divine sword shot out from her fingertips and turned into an inch-long golden light that followed after Yuanshi. The golden divine sword stuck to his white robe, but the latter was unaware of it. After doing this, he walked forward slowly with the girls. It was better to be careful when they were outside. Moreover, this place was full of crooks and honest folk. Someone might recognize them, so it was better to be cautious. Ming suddenly tugged at Yun Nuoshing's collar. His little hand pointed to a distant place and said softly, "Big brother, that thing?" Following her gaze, Yun Nuoshing saw a stone that was wrapped in a pitch-black light. It was only the size of a washbasin, and even the evil spirit I could not see what was inside. A star stone. Yun Nuoshing was stunned. He knew a little about this thing. It was originally an ordinary stone, but after staying in the starry sky for a long time, it had been contaminated by the power of the stars. It could have evolved into a top-notch material, or it could still be an ordinary starstone. Moreover, because of the rich power of the stars, many detection methods were not very useful. If one wanted to see what was inside, they could only directly split it open. Of course, even if they did not split it open, the starstone itself was a slightly unorthodox 7th-level material. Weapons forged with it would be contaminated with the power of the stars, and their power would increase by several times. What's wrong with that stone? Yun Nuoshing asked as he patted Ming's head. Hee, I just think it's very pretty. Ming stuck out her tongue and giggled. Yun Nuoshing rolled his eyes. He thought that this girl's treasure-hunting ability had sensed something, and was even a little excited. In the end, this girl said that she thought it was very pretty. Bringing Xian to the star-stone stall, Yun Nuoshing glanced behind the stone table. A youth with a cold and solemn expression was sitting quietly. He did not make a sound when Yun Nuoshing and the others stopped by. He did not seem to be here to do business. "Old mister, how much do I exchange for this star stone?" Although he looked very young, under the observation of the wood element with the evil spirit eye, he could see that he looked a little old, as if he had been through the vicissitudes of life. He did not look like a vigorous young man. Hearing Yun Nuoshing's words, the cold and solemn youth raised his eyes slightly and said unhurriedly, "A 7th level material with the thunder element, or a 6th level thunder element sword. Can I exchange it with black crystals?" Rubbing the star stone in his hand, Yun Nuoshing found that the power of the stars in his body resonated with it, causing his hand to tremble slightly. "If I can refine this star stone, perhaps my strength will rise to another level." Yun Nuoshing suddenly had this thought. The star stone was a material filled with powerful energy. Other than being used to forge weapons, it could also be refined into energy to increase one's strength. Although this was not the best way to use it, and in the eyes of blacksmiths it was a waste of natural resources, the power of the stars in the star stone resonated with the power of the stars in Yun Nuoshing's body. If he could refine and absorb it, his strength would rise to another level. However, if he relied on external forces to increase his strength, even if he had the spiritual godly physique that could automatically purify energy, there would still be some negative effects in the future. He knew this. Therefore, this thought was killed in a flash, and did not even exist for more than 3 seconds. "Okay, 150 kilograms of celestial-grade Xian crystals," the cold young man said slowly. Yun Nuoshing smiled and did not want to waste time with him. He threw down 150 kilograms of Xian crystals, grabbed the star stone, and put it in Ming's hand. Then he pulled Xian and left. He was rich and overbearing, so he naturally did not want to waste his breath on others. 100 kilograms of celestial-grade Xian crystals was nothing to him. Moreover, these people did not seem like people who would suffer losses. They passed by so many stalls, but they only heard people raising the price, not bargaining. After walking for a long time, when they disappeared from the sight of the cold young man, Yun Nuoshing slowed down. Looking at the cheerful Ming in his arms, he could not help but ask, "What's wrong with this thing?" Ming rubbed the stone wrapped in black energy with his little hand. He showed 2 cute canine teeth and said with a smile, "I'll tell my brother when we get back." Yun Nuoshing was stunned. He touched her head and said with a smile, "Little girl, don't keep me guessing." Hee. Ming smiled and put the star stone into Yun Nuoshing's pendant. He flicked his long hair and looked at Yun Nuoshing. Suddenly, he had an idea. He climbed onto Yun Nuoshing's shoulder like a little monkey, held his head with both hands, and laughed happily. "So strange," Yun Nuoshing murmured. He grabbed the 2 little feet hanging in front of his chest, smiled helplessly at Xian, and walked forward. Behind him, Xian looked at Ming, who was laughing happily. He could not help but smile and quickly followed. This small town was not very big. There were no more than 10 intersecting ancient streets. There were many people, all of whom had strong auras. At this time, they were like ordinary people, arguing with each other in this place that had turned into a vegetable market. After strolling through several streets, Yun Nuoshing stopped. During this period, he bought a green leaf crystal with rich wood element and a sky-burning stone with fire element with a few 100 kilograms of celestial-grade Xian crystals. He did not buy anything else. These 2 materials were very rare. Yun Nuoshing had once looked for the heaven-burning stone in a few shops, but he had found nothing. It was rare to find it here, but at the same time it was also fancied by someone. It was not easy to pay twice the price to snatch it. As for the rest, he did not buy anything. They stopped at a quiet place. This was probably the end of the town. The surroundings were empty, and it was not as noisy as the inside. Looking out, they saw a barren area. It was all yellow soil, as if it was an undeveloped area. Suddenly, Yuanshi came out of nowhere and patted Yun Nuoshing on the shoulder. He grinned and said, "Sorry to keep you waiting." Yun Nuoshing immediately became alert when he was patted on the shoulder. When he heard a familiar voice, he heaved a sigh of relief. He turned around and saw Yuan Shi with a smile on his face. He could not help but be stunned and said, "Did something good happen? You are smiling so happily." "Well, I guess so." Yuan Shi scratched his head and smiled. "Did you buy anything good?" "No, I only bought 3 stones. I didn't like the rest." Yun Nuoshing sighed and shook his head. Although the scale of this town was quite good, the materials he wanted were all expensive and rare. After all, these materials of single elemental energy were not that easy to come by. Most of them were found in areas with elemental themes. Even though the realm of the gods was vast and boundless, it was not to say that there were all kinds of materials in this kind of place. As far as the world knew, the only famous places with a single element theme were the forbidden areas. Yun Nuoshing had been there before and did not see any materials. "I see." Yuan Shi nodded thoughtfully. Then, he hesitated for a while. Under Yun Nuoshing and Yun Nuoshing's strange gazes, he laughed dryly and said, "Well, Nuoshing, lend me some money." Yun Nuoshing rolled his eyes and said, "How much do you need?" Yuan Shi rubbed his hands. His cheeks were slightly red. He hesitated for a long time like a snake. Then, he stretched out 3 fingers and laughed dryly. About 3,000 pounds of celestial-grade glazed crystals." Yun Nuoshing opened his mouth and swallowed. He quickly stuffed the 3,000 pounds of celestial-grade glazed crystals into his hand. Then, he asked, "What do you want to buy? It's so expensive." "I saw something good in an acquaintance's shop." Yuan Shi smiled mysteriously. He patted Yun Nuoshing's shoulder and said, "Thanks. I'll pay you back when the time comes. Hurry up. We've finished touring this small town. It's almost time to go out." Yun Nuoshing nodded and kicked him. Only after Yuan Shi disappeared around a corner did Yun Nuoshing sigh. Suddenly, he shivered, and all the hairs on his body stood up. He turned around abruptly, only to see a pair of crystal-clear but incomparably cold dark yellow eyes. He couldn't help but swallow his saliva. "It's you again." Yun Nuoshing could not help but mutter in his heart. Unbeknownst to him, his light purple eyes had condensed a bit of coldness. 2 pairs of gem-like eyes, separated by a distance, once again met each other, causing the temperature to drop by a lot. Just when Yun Nuoshing wanted to rush over and see what this person was all about, he lost sight of him again in the blink of an eye. He could not help but be stunned. He smacked his lips and asked in his heart, "Ziyi, that person, the power of time." "What?" Before he could finish his question, Ziyi gave him 4 words. He was stunned and hurriedly asked, "The power of time? What do you mean?" Ziyi sighed and said slowly, "Even from a distance, I can feel that the space he's in seems to have slowed down a lot. It's obvious that it's the power of time. However, it's not rich and he can't control it." Hiss! Yun Nuoshing sucked in a breath of cold air. The power of time was a power that only gods who had stepped into that level could come into contact with. In other words, the person who had met his gaze twice was actually an expert in the reincarnation mirror? But, thinking of this, Yun Nuoshing frowned again. He did not remember offending an expert in the reincarnation mirror, the Qi family? It doesn't seem like. Yun Nuoshing shook his head. According to Yuan Shao, there were pitifully few experts in the reincarnation mirror in this world. At least, there were no experts of this level in the great families. This meant that it had nothing to do with the 8 ancient families, let alone the 9 elemental temple. If it was someone from the 9 elemental temple, it would not have been so indifferent and murderous. Anyway, you just have to be careful. Even if it's not an expert in the reincarnation mirror, it should be an extremely powerful god who has mastered the power of time. You know the consequences. Ziyi reminded him in a low voice, which was rare. Yes. Yun Nuoshing nodded solemnly. Chapter 368. How do I break the power of time? Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but murmur. Mastering the power to control time meant that one would be invincible before the battle even began. It was just like the zero-time domain in the glass treasure mirror. Although it wasn't fully introduced, just a few short lines of words had given Yun Nuoxing a huge shock. She really didn't know what would happen if she experienced it herself. Speed suppression. This is your only choice and your only method. Similarly, it's your only weakness, Ziyi said softly. People who possess the power of time can control the flow of time as they wish. They can slow down or speed up time. Speeding up the flow of time for oneself and slowing down the flow of time for the enemy. Under the combination of the two, no matter how strong a person is, it's tantamount to being immobilized. Unless one has the invincible Vajra body, one will definitely die in such a state. Ziyi sighed. Can it be broken with the light element? Yun Nuoxing frowned. From the 4 words, she knew how terrifying this power was. No matter how strong the energy was, it could cause it to miss. No matter how slow the speed, it could still hit it. It was hard to imagine how one could resist such power. Well, let's think about it when the time comes. We still can't be sure that the person in dark yellow is looking for me. Yun Nuoxing scratched her head and spread out her hands optimistically. That's true. It might not be a match, Ziyi agreed. With such optimistic thoughts, the two of them relaxed their frowns. After waiting for a long time, they saw Yuan Shi jogging back from the direction they had been just now. He came to Yun Nuoxing's side and placed a pendant in Yun Nuoxing's hand. He smiled and said, "This is for you." Yun Nuoxing tossed the crescent-shaped pendant up and down. She looked at Yuan Shi and asked, "What's this?" "You'll know when you see it for yourself." Yuan Shi grinned. Yun Nuoxing suspiciously controlled his soul force to enter the crescent moon pendant. Just as he checked it, he was stunned for a moment. Then, he raised his head in surprise, only to see Yuan Shi smiling to the point that her eyes were narrowed. This, Yun Nuoxing opened his mouth, but did not know what to say. He saw a pile of materials in the hidden space of the pendant. Although it was not a huge amount, it was still very impressive. Moreover, these materials were all single-element materials, ranging from level 2 to level 6. According to his estimation, it was enough to make 2 or 3 level 6 weapons. I went to buy something from my uncle's acquaintance. He gave me a slight discount. Yuan Shi smiled and said, "What you need are single-element materials. It's hard to find them on the street. Although there are a lot of things here, it's impossible to have so many rare materials. So I'll look for someone, although it's quite expensive." "Well, thank you." Yun Nuoxing nodded, patted Yuan Shi's shoulder, and smiled. "It's nothing." Yuan Shi waved his hand and looked at the other end of the old street. He sighed and said with some regret, "Originally, there was a forging hall. The items traded there are really of high quality. However, to enter, you have to be a level 4 blacksmith or above. Nuoxing, you didn't get the title of a blacksmith, so you can't enter even if you rely on your connections." Forging hall? Yun Nuoxing blinked and followed his gaze. An ancient pavilion stood at the end of the street. A kind of vicissitudes of life could be felt from afar. It was as if it had existed since ancient times, making people feel reverence in their hearts. That hall is the core of the trade fair. Even some advanced blacksmiths can find materials that move their hearts in there. It's said that you can even find the purest single-element materials there. Uncle said that there might even be 7th or 8th rank materials there. Yuan Shi nodded, then leaned close to Yun Nuoxing's ear and whispered, "It's said that if your level is high enough, you might even be able to buy level 12 materials like the glazed divine crystal." Yun Nuoxing swallowed his saliva. His eyes lit up, then dimmed. He covered half of his face with his hand and smiled bitterly. "This is the first time I feel that it's a little inconvenient not to take the test. Can I take the test here? Can I take the test? Can I?" Yun Nuoshing grabbed Yuan Shi's shoulder and shook it hard, spitting saliva everywhere. When he heard that he could buy the glazed divine crystal, his rationality was instantly suppressed to the bottom. He needed the glazed divine crystal to refine his body to cultivate the glazed treasure mirror. The glazed divine crystal that kept burning in his soul was completely insufficient. He urgently needed this divine material now. It's a pity. I'm going to faint. Yuan Shi was shaken dizzy, and even his eyeballs were rolling. Yun Nuoshing laughed embarrassedly and quickly let go of Yuan Shi. He couldn't help but stick out his tongue when he saw that Yuan Shi was dizzy for a long time before coming back to his senses. Yuan Shi shook his head and said, "This trade fair doesn't have a proper organization to test a blacksmith's rank. If you want to take the test, you can only go outside and find a proper organization to do it. Well, I also think that it's not a bad idea for you to find time to take the test. See if you can reach. I reckon it's only level 3. See if you can reach level 3. But you have to be level 4 to enter." Yun Nuoshing smiled bitterly. "Who allowed you to enter? It's probably all bartering inside. Moreover, even if you go out and find an organization to take the test and reach level 4, you won't be able to make it in time. This trade fair won't always be open, so you can only wait for the next time." Purple Knight knocked on the glazed divine crystal that was wrapped in purple flames and sighed. "Sometimes, it's not a bad choice to hang a sign. It can make people revere you. Also, hang the sign of a blacksmith and an apothecary. When will you take the test to become a matrix master?" F***CK. Why do I have to take so many tests? When Yun Nuoshing heard this, he rolled his eyes. What he hated the most was the assessment. Wasn't it just showing off his skills in public? It was so embarrassing. No, wait a moment. Matrix Master? Why do we have to take the test for Matrix Masters too? No, why do we have to take the test for Matrix Masters too? Suddenly, Yun Nuoshing felt that something was wrong. Have you seen anyone like you who can casually set up a basket of Matrix Masters? Purple Knight couldn't help but facepalm. How much of this guy's common sense was lacking? Listen carefully. A Matrix Master refers to those who can weave Matrix Masters as they wish. They don't need an array diagram to set up a Matrix Master. Although you both come from inheritances, it's the same. You can be considered a Matrix Master if you can weave a Matrix Master directly, Purple Knight said speechlessly. Speaking of which, I think I saw Jin Wang and the others tearing apart array diagrams to set up Matrix Masters. After Purple Knight mentioned it, Yun Nuoshing recalled something. When they were attacking the sacred weapons shrine outside Yuyan City, Jin Wang and the others used array diagrams to set up Matrix Masters. Unlike Matrix Masters, if other people wanted to use a spirit array, they would need to use a spirit array diagram. That was to first weave the spirit array, and then engrave it on a scroll so that it could be opened directly. Similarly, only Matrix Masters could write spirit array diagrams. Tearing the spirit array diagram would open the spirit array. It was convenient and fast, and did not require time to weave. Matrix Masters are divided into 5 levels. Well, it's their corresponding rank. Mortal, Immortal, Devil, God, and Divine. Of course, I'll tell you when you meet them in the future. For now, you should take the test for Blacksmith and Alchemist, Purple Knight said with a smile. So troublesome. Why are there so many things to take the test? Yun Nuoshing facepalmed. This was the first time she heard that there were so many things to take the test. Well, it's just a type of profession. The God world has existed for so many years. One epoch is 100 billion years, which is a trillion years. It has spanned a total of 139 epochs. It's not surprising that something has been produced, Violet Knight said. 1 trillion, huh? That's a really long number. One era is like countless eras, Yun Nuoshing said with emotion as she raised her hand to block the small sun. Don't be like an old man lamenting the passage of time. You're only around 20 years old. Purple Knight was speechless. After a while, he smiled and said, "Anyway, you should find a place to take the test first. You just need to get 2 tags. You should know that alchemists and blacksmiths are not only able to generate enviable profits, they are also hubs that connect countless people. Well, to put it simply, it's a favor. It's relatively easy for these types of people to find fighters, and they can even become guests of honor of some forces. Therefore, many people choose to specialize in a secondary profession. With a single call, the world is mine." Yun Nuashing nodded. Fire and metal elements are also relatively rare. Although you can use the fire of the dragon vein to refine medicine, it's still not as pure as your own elemental fire. Only these types of people can become alchemists. Those with metal and fire elements can become alchemists, but these types are even rarer. Purple Knight said with some regret. "Forget it. Do you want me to take on 3 different professions? No, 4 professions?" Yun Nuashing hurriedly waved his hand. How could he not hear the regret in Purple Knight's words? A person's energy was limited. Even if he really had the metal element and could become an alchemist, he wouldn't be able to master it. According to his thinking, he should put the Matrix Master aside and ignore it. Taking on the Potion Master and blacksmiths was already the limit. "I'm already being merciful by not asking you to become a totem user." Purple Knight sneered. "I didn't hear anything, I don't know anything." Yun Nuashing pretended to be a fool as she mumbled. Rolling her eyes, Yun Nuashing looked at Yuan Shi and Purple Knight, who had been looking at her, and said, "Oh, there are some places nearby where I can take the blacksmiths and potion masters assessment. There are some in some big cities. Why, are you going to enter other professions?" Yuan Shi smiled. "You can say that. I'll just take the assessment and get myself a level 4 blacksmith. While I'm at it, I'll also get myself a potion master and a matrix master." Forget about that." Yun Nuashing nodded and sighed. "I don't want to encounter such situations in the future where I can't even take a look at the treasures when I see them. As far as I know, the Divine Sky City has the assessment, but—" At this point, Yuan Shi looked at Yun Nuashing and raised his eyebrows. "Ah, that's right. If there aren't any accidents, we won't go back. We'll still head out of the Fengyan Mountain, to the Sea God's territory." Yun Nuashing, who knew what he meant, nodded and said softly, "All right, if there's nothing else, let's head out. Make some preparations in Lihuan City. It's about time for us to bid farewell to the land." Yuan Shi sighed. If they were going to sail for a long time, they would need to prepare a lot of things. At the thought of this, he looked at Ming, who was in Yun Nuashing's arms, and then at Little Purple Soul. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. At the very least, he had to prepare food for these 2 girls. Moreover, he had to buy a map of the East Sea. "Brother, are we going to Shanghai again?" Ming, who had been quiet all this while, instinctively sensed something after hearing this. She quickly raised her head, blinked her big eyes, and asked, "Yes, I think we'll be staying at sea for a long time this time." Yun Nuashing patted her head and smiled. Although Lihuan City wasn't far from the East Sea and was still a short distance away, there weren't any other places to stay around except for a port city. "I don't want to eat fish." Upon hearing this, Ming immediately scrunched up her little face and looked at Yun Nuashing with puppy eyes. Her pitiful look made people laugh. "Don't worry." Yun Nuashing smiled and walked towards the wormhole. In the corner of the town, a pair of deep yellow eyes stared at the disappearing purple figure. After a long time, it also disappeared. Chapter 369. Early the next morning, Yun Nuashing and the others left the inn early when the first glimmer of light passed through the horizon and scattered across the land. They went to the market in the city to purchase some supplies and replenish their stock in the auction house. They also inquired about whether there were any organizations related to blacksmiths while they were at it. However, to their disappointment, there was no such building in Lihuan City. There were alchemists, however, which made them feel slightly refreshed. However, they couldn't help but sigh when they arrived. Multi-elemental alchemist. My lords, please forgive me. This place really doesn't have the qualifications for such a test. If my lords need such a test, this humble one recommends you to go to those big cities. This was the result that Yun Nuoshing and the others obtained from this alchemy hall. It wasn't a large building, but there was a high-grade alchemist overseeing it. At this time, this noble alchemist was sweating profusely and lowering his posture. The others couldn't help but be speechless. They didn't expect that a high-grade alchemist would be so afraid just by hearing the name multi-elemental alchemist. After bidding farewell to this old man, Yun Nuoshing couldn't help but chuckle when she thought of the former's terrified look. She didn't expect that an alchemist would be frightened by another alchemist. Forget it. If there isn't one here, let's go to the next city. If it still doesn't work, we'll go to the sea god's domain to test again. This matter isn't urgent. Yun Nuoshing spread out her hands and smiled. They slowly turned around a few slender streets and came out of the city. Yun Nuoshing looked back at this colossus and sighed. When he thought of how he was surrounded like a monkey when he just left the city, black lines drooped down on his handsome face. What was even more excessive was that when he looked back on the streets he passed by, not even a ghost could be seen. It was as if he had really become a bloodthirsty demon that everyone was afraid of. Let's go. The matter in Lihuan City has come to an end. Our journey is about to continue. Yun Nuoshing clenched her fists and laughed loudly. Yuan Shi and the others also laughed and raised their fists as if in agreement. Chirp. Even the little phoenix let out an excited cry and stretched its wings, making everyone laugh. 10,000 meters up in the sky, a purplish-black light streaked across the horizon. A thin layer of energy shield dispersed the incoming wind. After a long while, the purplish-black light turned into a black sword. It gradually slowed down, revealing the situation on the huge sword. In the center of the sword, a black-clothed youth sat cross-legged. Rich star energy appeared on the surface of the sword, enveloping the space within 100 feet. In the pitch-black energy, starlight floated up and down. It was as if he was really standing in a star field, mysterious and beautiful. After cultivating for a long time, the youth sensed that his speed had slowed down. His eyebrows trembled slightly and he withdrew the star power into his body. Then, he slowly opened his eyes and looked at the clouds below. Then, he tilted his head and looked at the empty sky behind him. Then, he looked at Yuan Shi who was playing with the two girls and breathed a sigh of relief. No one is chasing us anymore, right? Hearing Yun Nuoshing's words, the three who were playing happily stopped. Xian also stopped cultivating and stretched lazily, showing her perfect curve. Yun Nuoshing's gaze unconsciously moved over, but when she looked over, it drifted away again. No one. With the power of the Netherworld Ruin Sword, Yuan Shi probed for a while. Then, he breathed a sigh of relief and complained, "These guys are really persistent. They've been chasing us for a whole month." Jin Wang and the others had just made their stance clear, but they couldn't wait to chase after us as soon as we left the city. This is a provocation to the Divine Palace. It should be the Qi family's doing. No, it's not just that. The kill order is also a bounty order. 8 super forces jointly signed it. I guess in their eyes I'm a big fat piece of meat. They all want to take a bite out of me. Yun Nuoshing said helplessly. Well, there's still a month. According to the speed of the Netherworld Ruin Sword, we'll reach the border between the Eastern Sea and the Northern Wastelands in a month. There's a port city there. Let's rest there for a while before continuing our journey. Yuan Shi took out a map and looked at it. There's still a month. Yun Nuoshing murmured. She looked at Xian, who was constantly yawning. They had been hurrying along this month with a group of people chasing after them like a pack of wolves. They hadn't rested at all. Although the Netherworld Ruin's sword was rushing along and they were cultivating, such a boring journey was really hard on the two lively girls. Yun Nuoshing and the others could endure it, but it didn't mean that they could. If this journey is like before, where it's easily half a year or a few months, I'm afraid we'll go crazy. Yuan Shi stretched and said helplessly. Yun Nuoshing smiled bitterly and took out the treasure map. She looked at the area around the red dot, but it was empty. There was nothing. She put it away helplessly. Looking at the white world, she couldn't help but sigh. Accompanied by white clouds every day, this life is too boring. Yun Nuoshing sighed. Don't think about people at this altitude of 20,000 meters. Although we're not at the peak of the divine realm, the air is more or less thin. Fortunately, the Netherworld Ruin's sword has its own barrier. Otherwise, these two girls won't be able to take it. Yuan Shi said. Ha ha. Yun Nuoshing smiled and shook her head. Do you feel like you've reached the immortal rank during this period of cultivation? Yun Nuoshing looked at Xian and smiled. Not yet. I'm still at the half-immortal rank 8. I'm still a bit away. Xian shook her head. She had been cultivating during this period. Using the 5 elements body and the divine physique of acceptance spirit, she could sense a lot more energy. Her cultivation speed was also much faster. However, this kind of half-immortal cultivation was the slowest, especially the last rank. After all, the energy in her body had to be compressed to the point where it changed. For now, the energy in Xian's body was still the coexistence of Yuan Li and immortal qi. The latter accounted for most of the energy. The 5 elements body's cultivation speed is very fast. It's already very fast for you to reach the 8th rank. Although pills or profound crystals can help you reach the 8th rank in one go, I don't recommend it. Yun Nuoshing shrugged and said. Okay. Xian nodded. Although she said so, she still cultivated very hard. Because in her heart, she always wanted to become stronger and help Yun Nuoshing. Yuan Shi is almost at the 10th immortal rank, right? When can you break through to the half-demon rank? Yun Nuoshing smiled and looked at Yuan Shi. How can it be so fast? The time for the divine physique to flourish is when I'm at the initial immortal rank. I'm not like you, who can casually advance in rank. Yuan Shi rolled his eyes and shook his head. Moreover, the most important thing in the immortal rank is to temper the power of the soul and the power of the element. My wind element hasn't reached the purest level yet. Also, the soul. I don't know how to cultivate it. Not everyone had the cultivation method of the soul. When Yuan Shi left the Yuan family, he hadn't reached the immortal rank. Therefore, he didn't have the cultivation method. If he tried to figure it out by himself, he didn't know how long it would take. In this world, there are wind elements everywhere. The consumption of the soul will increase. Yun Nuoshing shrugged. I know. Yuan Shi sighed and scratched his head. Yun Nuoshing curled his lips. Although he could help, for example, by using the heaven-refining great array to refine him a few times and drain his soul energy, he was only worried that if he didn't control his strength well enough, he would end up crippling Yuan Shi. That would be fun. Big brother, can we fly a little lower? While the two of them were talking, Little Purple Soul suddenly tugged at Yun Nuoshing's sleeve and pointed at the clouds below with a smile. Yun Nuoshing looked at the clouds below and nodded with a smile. At the same time, the Netherruin's sword slowed down and slowly descended into the clouds. The hazy mist covered their feet, making it impossible to see the Netherruin's sword. It was as if they were really riding the clouds. Hee hee. Ming pulled Little Purple Soul and ran around on the Netherruin's sword. Their joyful laughter floated above the sea of clouds, easing the tense atmosphere. Be careful, don't fall. Yun Nuoshing shook his head in amusement when he saw the two girls playing around. Little Star, Little Purple doesn't seem to have grown up. She looks just like the first time we saw her in the images. Xian tugged at Yun Nuoxing's sleeve and whispered into his ear. Yes, she hasn't grown up. In the past 2 years, I haven't left a single mark on her body. It's like. Yun Nuoxing nodded. Halfway through his sentence, he forgot what he was going to say and frowned. Drifting outside of time? Yuan, she asked tentatively. Yes, that's what I mean. Yun Nuoxing sighed and said, I've checked. There's nothing wrong with her. No, I should say that I can't find anything wrong with her. Immortality? Xian blinked at Mei Mao and said, I don't know. Yun Nuoxing shook his head. He didn't know why Little Purple Soul was like this. If he had to say something, it wasn't just Little Purple Soul. Yun Nuoxing was also like this. After so many years, if he took off the snow flame mask, he would see a face that was as beautiful as it was 6 years ago. It was a face that was always mistaken for a girl's. It's probably because she's growing slower. Yun Nuoxing thought so. Although it seemed to be too slow for Little Purple Soul. The sea of clouds suddenly churned. Then, Yun Nuoxing saw that the clouds beside him were like waves that rose dozens of meters high. It was as if there was some kind of energy explosion under the clouds. It gave the people on the Nethervoid sword a fright. What the hell? Yun Nuoxing was the first to react when he saw a white wall rising into the sky. He was so shocked that he froze. The moment he reacted, he grabbed Ming and Little Purple Soul to his side and steered the Netherworld Ruins sword to the side. Bang! An unknown force hit the Netherworld Ruins sword and sent them flying in beautiful arcs in the sky. Terrified screams echoed in the sky. By the time Yun Nuoxing and the others stabilized themselves and climbed onto the Netherworld Ruins sword, they were already thousands of feet away. What was that? Yuan Shi, who had just regained his footing on the Netherworld Ruins sword, looked at the expanding clouds and couldn't help but gulp. Whoosh! A huge black shadow pierced through the sea of clouds and tore the sea of clouds apart. The storm it stirred up hit Yun Nuoxing and the others, pushing them far away. They couldn't even open their eyes, so they couldn't see what it was. Netherworld Ruins. Get away! Feeling the aura that was still close at hand, Yun Nuoxing shuddered violently and hurriedly roared. Although he did not know what was next to him, his intuition told him that it was very bad, very bad. Buzz! Netherworld Ruins heard him and quickly responded. Some runes appeared on the surface of the sword and locked Yun Nuoxing and the others tightly on the sword. Then, it turned into a purple-black light and fled far away. Bang! The churning sea of clouds exploded completely after a dull sound. Then, a huge black object appeared in their line of sight. Its huge wings that stretched across the sky flapped gently, stirring up strong winds that caused the surrounding space to slightly distort. A dragon! They sucked in a breath of cold air. Their eyes were full of shock. They had never seen such a huge dragon. Its wings were thousands of miles long. Even the dragon's scales on its body were countless times bigger than theirs. It was as if they were watching a mountain range fly across the sky. Under those pitch-black scales, the bulging muscles were like a ferocious beast with its mouth wide open. Those wildly flapping wings made the space tremble. Yun Nuoxing didn't doubt that if he kicked it again, the space within a radius of 10,000 miles would turn into a pitch-black void in the blink of an eye. Purple! Purple! Purple night! Yun Nuoxing, who was completely stunned, shouted in panic. This was simply beyond his imagination. Even the little phoenix lying on his head was stunned. The pressure of the ancient bloodline and the dragon's aura automatically resisted each other, and the aftermath of the energy was felt by everyone. Don't yell and shout. Isn't it just a dragon? Well, although it is very big. Purple Knight was irritated by the shouting and shouted impatiently. However, his voice became weak, causing Yun Nuoxing to roll his eyes. It should be some ancient bloodline. Moreover, it shouldn't have survived for a short period of time. Otherwise, it wouldn't have grown so big, Purple Knight said calmly. Then, he went silent again, as if he was thinking about something. Yun Nuoxing's face twitched. With a thought, the Ling Hong sword appeared in his hand. He looked at the black mountain range with vigilance. They were far away from the dragon, and could barely see the whole thing. It filled their entire line of sight and made them feel that it was a little unreal. Fortunately, the dragon didn't pay any attention to Yun Nuoxing and the others. It didn't even turn its head and flew far away. It flapped its huge wings and disappeared from their line of sight in just a few breaths. It's just passing by. Yun Nuoxing heaved a sigh of relief. After he relaxed, he realized that his clothes were drenched. If it weren't for the whirlpool zither in his body resisting the vast dragon's aura, he probably wouldn't have been able to move at all. Fortunately, it didn't come out to look for food. Or does it look down on us? Yuanshi patted his chest and heaved a sigh of relief. He laughed dryly. If they were used to feed the dragon, they wouldn't even be enough to fill the gaps between its teeth. Ahaha! Yun Nuoxing smiled bitterly. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.